Hey guys, tonight we step straight into the murky heart of 19th century London. Imagine yourself moving down a narrow lane, the cobblestones slick with recent rain, gas lamps glowing in hazy yellow halos, and every shadow carrying the promise of both danger and discovery. You're not here for a casual stroll, you're on your way to work in a Victorian brothel. Not exactly the 9 to 5 your career counsellor would have recommended, but hey, choices are limited. You can already smell it. A mix of coal smoke, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of cheap perfume drifting from an upstairs window. You probably won't survive this in one piece, but don't panic yet. At least you'll look historically accurate while trying .so, before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know your location and the time you're watching this. I love seeing how this strange little community spans the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, and with every step you're reminded that London in the 1800s isn't the polished postcard image of Big Ben and royal guards. This is the underbelly. These streets pulse with pickpockets, dock workers, drunken sailors, and women who survive on their wits. The brothel you're headed to isn't officially marked on a map, it hides in plain sight. To the casual passerby, it might look like an ordinary boarding house, but the subtle clues give it away. Curtains drawn at odd hours, music faintly playing long after midnight, and men entering who never seem to carry luggage. The front door groans as you push it open, and instantly you're swallowed by warmth. Not the cozy fireplace kind, but the stuffy, humid air thickened by candles, smoke, and the faint tang of gin. The hallway is narrow, wallpaper patterned with florals now yellowed and peeling. A staircase climbs steeply upward, creaking as footsteps scatter across its boards. You take it all in, realizing this is more than just a building. It's a stage, and every worker inside plays a role. Historians still argue whether most Victorian brothels leaned more toward elegance or squalor. Some accounts describe plush interiors with velvet furniture, heavy curtains, and chandeliers dimmed for mood. Others insist most were ramshackle operations, barely cleaned, with bedding reused until it could nearly walk away on its own. In truth, both pictures existed side by side, depending on whether the madam targeted wealthy gentlemen or sailors paid once every few months. Tonight, you're somewhere in between. The floorboards groan, but the chandelier overhead, though missing a few crystals, still throws fractured light across the parlor. You can't help but notice the smells. Forget romantic rose petals and lavender sachets. It's coal dust clinging to coats, cheap soap masking sweat, and an undertone of damp rot that no candle can disguise. The perfume worn by the workers tries valiantly to compete, a sweet, almost cloying floral blend bought from a street vendor for pennies. It works, mostly, if you don't inhale too deeply. A voice carries from the parlor, a man's laughter punctuated by the high notes of a piano. Brothels often doubled as entertainment houses. Patrons might arrive for conversation, music, and alcohol before anything else. In fact, records show that some visitors never left with more than a flushed face from gin and a tune stuck in their head. But for you, the role is different. You're not here to drink. You're here to sell a fantasy carefully wrapped in silk ribbons and candlelight. Moving further inside, your boots sink slightly into a threadbare rug. A mirror hangs crooked on the wall, its silvering tarnished so badly your reflection looks like a ghost peering back at you. And maybe that's fitting, because the life of a Victorian brothel worker was often a kind of half-existence. Society didn't see you as respectable, yet it relied on your presence to quietly keep other worlds in balance. A paradox with lipstick. Here's a quirky tidbit to lighten the mood. In some parts of Europe, it was believed that crocodile dung, dried and powdered, could serve as a contraceptive when packed into certain unmentionable places. Thankfully for you, Victorian London is not ancient Egypt, but the remedies offered here aren't much better. Herbal concoctions, dubious tonics, and whispered guarantees from back-alley chemists. Spoiler alert, few worked and most were downright dangerous. But hey, desperate times, desperate crocodiles, dot your I's, adjust to the dim light as you pass into the parlor itself. The piano stands in the corner, slightly out of tune, but gamely played by a worker between assignments. Laughter floats through the air, though you can hear the weariness underneath it, like a violin string stretched just a bit too tight. Men lounge with tankards of gin or beer, leaning too close, their words slurred by drink. This isn't the glamorous gentleman's club of novels, it's work, and every smile is part of the trade. You catch yourself leaning against the wall, fingers brushing over chipped paint. And in this moment, you realize the paradox of the job. You're both invisible and hyper-visible. Outside these walls, society labels you a fallen woman, whispers your name in scandal, and pretends not to see you on the street. Inside, every eye is on you, every gesture measured, every laugh rehearsed. It's theatre, but without curtains to close at the end of the performance. Historians still argue whether Victorian society's obsession with morality actually created the very industry it condemned. By pressing women into limited roles and shaming those who stepped outside, did society force them into brothels as one of the few survival strategies? Or were brothels simply inevitable in any growing urban sprawl? The debate rages in lecture halls, but for you, standing in this candlelit parlor, it's less philosophy, more survival. Another sound interrupts your thoughts. The steady clink of coins counted in the back room. Because at the end of the day, every sigh, every laugh, every whispered promise comes down to money. And though it flows across the polished wood counter, little of it will ever reach your pocket. The madam takes her cut, the landlord takes his, and what remains keeps you fed and clothed, if barely. The grand irony is that brothels lined entire streets in parts of London, a silent economy everyone pretended not to notice. Still, there are moments of levity. A fellow worker brushes past, muttering a joke about the pianist's hopeless attempts at Beethoven. You snicker, even as exhaustion weighs down your shoulders. Humour is survival too. Without it, the nights would stretch endlessly, and the days would dissolve into grey nothing. Your first impressions are cemented now. This is a world of contradictions. Light and shadow, music and weariness, perfume and mildew, invisibility and hyper-attention. You stand in the middle, adjusting your corset, readying your smile, and realizing that every step deeper into this brothel is a step away from the outside world's version of you. Out there, you're judged and dismissed. In here, you're part of a hidden machine that keeps turning, fueled by candlelight, coin, and the endless hunger of human desire. The parlour begins to thin as the night deepens, but for you, the hours are far from over. Clients trickle through the velvet curtain, some staggering, some quiet, leaving the main room dotted with empty glasses and the faint echo of laughter. You retreat to the corner near the staircase, rubbing your hands together against the draught creeping through the cracked windows. That's when Clara joins you again, slipping her arm through yours. Her smile is small but warm, a spark of solidarity in the smoky haze. It doesn't take long before you realise that survival here isn't just about following the madam's rules or pleasing clients. It's about the friendships forged in these dimly lit rooms. Without them, the nights would stretch endlessly, like cobblestone streets with no turning. With them, even the heaviest hours carry flickers of light. Clara drags you toward the back hallway, away from prying eyes. 5 minutes, she whispers. or I'll collapse on my feet. You find yourself in the cramped kitchen where a kettle simmers faintly on the stove. 2 other workers are already there, Ada with her flushed cheeks and tired fingers, and Betsy, her laughter bubbling even now. They welcome you into the little circle, passing around a chipped teacup filled with weak, sweetened tea dot. This hidden corner feels like another world. Gone are the painted smiles and rehearsed gestures. Here, shoulders slump, corset laces loosen, and jokes fly freely. Ada groans dramatically, rubbing her wrists. If I play one more sailor's jig, I'll throw the piano out the window. Betsy cackles, spilling a bit of tea down her bodice. Do that, and the madam will tie the keys around your neck and make you wear it as jewellery. Everyone laughs, including you, the sound soft but real. A mainstream fact comes to mind. Brothel workers often form tight-knit communities, supporting each other in ways the outside world refused to. Letters from the time describe women pooling money to cover a sick friend's rent, sharing food, and defending one another from violent clients. In a society that branded them outcasts, they created families of their own, stitched together with humour and shared survival. Clara leans closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Did I ever tell you about the bishop? You shake your head, curious. She grins. Came in here once, disguised in a shabby coat, but forgot to take off his ring, big gold thing with a cross on it. Spent half the night lecturing us about morality before sneaking behind the curtain. Ada snorts into her tea. Historians will never argue about hypocrisy, she says wryly. You nearly choke on your sip, the laughter bubbling in your chest despite the absurdity. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some brothels reportedly kept pet animals, cats for good luck, or birds to entertain clients. One London madam supposedly had a parrot that learned to mimic voices, greeting visitors with a cheery, "Pay up, love." You imagine such a bird perched in the parlour tonight, mocking the clerk's stammer or the soldier's off-key singing. The thought makes you giggle, and Clara nudges you with her elbow, pleased to have coaxed genuine laughter out of you. Historians still argue whether these friendships were genuine bonds or simply strategic alliances. Some claim the women clung together purely out of necessity, a defense mechanism against a hostile world. Others suggest the camaraderie was heartfelt, a chosen family forged in fire. Listening to Betsy tease Ada, watching Clara share her tea with you without hesitation, you feel certain the truth lies in the middle. Strategy or not, the comfort is real, and tonight, that's what matters. The kettle hisses and Betsy pours another round, though the tea is little more than tinted water. Better than gin, she insists, though you doubt it. Still, you sip gratefully, feeling the faint warmth spread through your chest. For a moment, the brothel fades away. It's just 4 women sharing stolen minutes, the laughter of sisters echoing against cracked plaster. Your mind drifts to the world outside, where respectable women sip tea in drawing rooms, their friendships polished and proper. You almost envy them, though you suspect their smiles hide their own cages. Here, your friendships may be born of desperation, but they are unvarnished, honest in a way society rarely allows. Ada sets her teacup down with a clatter. Back to work, she sighs, rising reluctantly. Clara groans but follows, tightening her corset strings. Betsy squeezes your hand, her eyes twinkling. First kitchen circle's always the hardest. By the third, you'll be laughing so hard you forget where you are. You trail after them, back toward the parlour. The curtain parts, and once again, the performance resumes. Ada takes her seat at the piano. Clara slides into a client's side with practiced ease. Betsy twirls a strand of hair and flirts with the clerk. And you paste on your smile, but this time it feels steadier. You carry the warmth of that kitchen circle with you like a secret charm. Later, when the parlour grows louder again, Clara passes by and winks, whispering, "Still alive?" You grin faintly, answering, "Barely." She laughs, the sound bright enough to make the soldier glance over in confusion. The bond between you grows stronger with every shared joke, every whispered confession. You know you'll need it in the nights ahead. A soldier begins another song, off-key but enthusiastic, and the parlor erupts in cheers. You laugh along, though your mind hums with the memory of the kettle, the chipped cups, the warmth of tea. That secret refuge will always be waiting, a small sanctuary carved out of exhaustion. Another joke creeps into your mind as you watch Betsy coax coins from the clerk. If laughter is the best medicine, then we're running the cheapest pharmacy in London. You smother the laugh, saving it for later when the kitchen fills again. Humour, you remind yourself, is the glue that binds you all together. The friendships are fragile. Yes, jealousies flare, rivalries simmer. But tonight, you've seen their strength, and you realize that in a house built on illusions, the only truths that matter are the ones shared over chipped cups in the back kitchen, whispered between sips of weak tea and bursts of laughter. The laughter fades as the hour grows late and the parlour slips into that uneasy lull where shadows stretch longer and voices lower. You're leaning against the wall, half listening to Ada mangle another waltz on the piano when a sharp knock cuts through the din. 3 raps, loud, deliberate, like a fist that wants to be noticed. The music halts mid-bar, conversation falters, everyone glances toward the door. You don't need Clara to whisper in your ear to know who it is. The law. The madam glides forward, her face calm but her hands smoothing her gown in quick, practiced strokes. She gestures subtly for Ada to keep playing, though softer now, a flimsy disguise of normalcy. Betsy gathers glasses from the tables, as though clearing clutter will erase suspicion. You stand frozen, pulse quickening, until Clara tugs discreetly at your sleeve, murmuring, "Breathe, they come often." The door creaks open, revealing 2 men in uniform. Not soldiers this time, policemen, with stiff collars and expressions carved from granite. One steps inside, scanning the parlour with the detachment of a man checking livestock at a market. The other lingers in the doorway, his hand resting casually on his truncheon. A mainstream fact. Prostitution wasn't technically illegal in Victorian England, but almost everything surrounding it was. Brothel keeping, soliciting, even simply being suspected of immoral behaviour could invite fines, arrests or raids. The police operated in a murky zone of discretion, often choosing when to enforce and when to ignore, depending on bribes, politics or sheer whim. The madam approaches the officer with her most gracious smile. "Evening, sir," she says smoothly, her voice calm enough to soothe rattled nerves. "What brings you to our humble house tonight?" Her tone drips with politeness, but her eyes flicker with calculation. You realize quickly this isn't her first negotiation, nor will it be her last. The officer surveys the room, pausing briefly on you before moving on. His gaze lingers on Clara, on Ada's flushed cheeks, on Betsy clutching a tray of glasses. He doesn't smile. Instead, he says, "Noise complaints. The neighbours claim your piano carries down the street." His voice is low, bored, as though rehearsed. The madam titters politely. "Surely, officer, it's no louder than a church hymn." Behind you, a client shifts uncomfortably. You sense his fear. Respectable men caught in a raid risk exposure, scandal, even ruin. That fear is currency tonight, and the policemen know it. They don't need to shut down the house, they only need to hint at the possibility. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorian policemen allegedly carried fine books on their nightly patrols, where they tallied informal payments from brothels. A few coins exchanged discreetly at the door bought silence for another week. One historian described it as a shadow tax, unofficial, unrecorded, but widely accepted. The madam, without missing a beat, glides toward her office. She doesn't announce her intention, but everyone knows what she's fetching. Coins. The policeman waits patiently, eyes still sweeping the room. The silence stretches uncomfortably, broken only by Ada resuming her tune, her fingers shaking slightly on the keys. Historians still argue whether the police truly aimed to protect women or merely exploited them. Some claim officers offered a measure of safety by maintaining order in brothels, preventing outright violence. Others insist corruption ran rampant, with policemen extorting payments and turning blind eyes to abuse. The truth, as always, was messy, depending on the officer, the night, and the madam's skill at negotiation. The madam returns, a small purse tucked discreetly in her hand. She presses it into the officer's palm with a grace that almost masks the transaction. His fingers close around it, and for the first time his expression softens. "Keep the music down," he mutters. Then, with a curt nod, he steps back toward the door. His partner follows, their boots echoing on the threshold before the night swallows them again. The moment they're gone, the parlor exhales. Ada slams her hands down on the keys in a discordant flourish, and everyone bursts into nervous laughter. Betsy mutters, "Fine books, my corset strings," earning chuckles even from the jittery clerk. Clara squeezes your arm, whispering, "See, breathe. They come, they go, and we keep the lamps lit." Still, your heart pounds. The encounter lasted less than 10 minutes, yet it left the air heavy, charged. You can't shake the image of the officer's eyes scanning the room, cataloguing each face, each dress, each nervous twitch. In those moments, you weren't people. You were evidence waiting to be recorded. The madam sweeps back into the room, her expression smooth as silk. "Well," she announces, "where were we?" The clients chuckle nervously, clinking glasses, eager to resume their indulgence. But you can see the tension hasn't vanished. It lingers like smoke, reminding everyone that pleasure here exists only at the mercy of the law's indifference. Later, comma. Clara pulls you aside in the hallway. Her voice drops low. "Never argue with them, never. If they want coin, let the madam pay. If they want silence, give it. If they want names—" She pauses, her eyes narrowing. "Don't give yours." You nod, understanding more in that moment than any lecture could teach. The law isn't a shield here, it's a blade, and whether it cuts depends on how well the madam can dull its edge. You return to the parlor, watching the laughter rebuild. Itself like a rickety stage set. Men resume their jokes, women lean close, Ada pounds the keys. On the surface, everything looks normal again, but beneath you feel the undercurrent of fear, the knowledge that at any knock the curtain could fall. And you think, not without a bitter smile, if lawmen truly wanted to reform society, they wouldn't collect coins in purses. They'd collect the wigs and waistcoats of the very men sitting here tonight. But of course, that's not how the world works. You chuckle quietly to yourself, a whispered joke. Welcome to Victorian justice, half morality play, half pickpocket act. The thought steadies you, even as the candles flicker, even as the music wavers. For the first time tonight, you feel less like a bystander and more like someone who belongs here, not because you embrace the danger, but because you've seen how everyone endures it together. Fear, laughter, bribery, music. It's all part of the rhythm, and tonight you've learned to keep time. The parlor feels calmer now, but the echoes of the policeman's visit linger like a cold draft that won't quite leave the room. Ada plays a softer tune, and Clara whispers in the ear of a clerk who looks too timid to know what to do with himself. The soldier has fallen half asleep on the sofa, and Betsy fusses with his empty tankard, pretending not to notice the drool glistening at the corner of his mouth. You glance at the chandelier swaying faintly in the smoky air, and you realize that beneath the laughter and songs, everything here turns on one constant truth. Money. Coins glint in the candlelight, sliding from pocket to palm, from palm to tray, from tray to the madam's ledger. It's an endless stream, flowing in one direction more than any other. You're part of the current, whether you want to be or not. A mainstream fact, brothel economies in Victorian London were surprisingly structured. The madam took a cut of everything, sometimes half, sometimes more. while the remainder went to the workers. Clients paid for time, drinks, and sometimes even for music or special requests. Rent, food, and clothing often came out of your share, leaving you with just enough to get by, but rarely enough to escape. Clara once explained it bluntly. You'll never get rich here, love, but you might not starve either. She wasn't bitter, just practical. It's survival math. Every smile you give, every laugh you force, every hour you endure, it all reduces down to coins counted in a purse at the end of the week. You watch as Betsy bargains with the half-sleeping soldier. She nudges him awake just long enough to extract a few coins before steering him toward the curtain. His steps are clumsy, but his money jingles loud enough to satisfy the madam. Betsy winks at you as she passes, and you can't help admiring her skill. She turns exhaustion into opportunity, never letting a coin slip past. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorian brothels issued tokens instead of taking money directly, forcing clients to buy coins from the madam first. This meant men paid up front, and the house controlled the flow completely. The tokens sometimes bore cheeky designs, a pair of crossed legs, a heart pierced with an arrow. Imagine jingling pockets full of those as you stagger home, trying to explain to your wife why you sound like a carnival game. You learn quickly that money isn't just exchanged here, it's negotiated, maneuvered, even gamed. The madam keeps her ledger meticulous, but you know she skims here and there. Workers whisper about side deals, about clients who slip them extra coins for secrets or companionship beyond the norm. Everything has a price, even silence. Especially silence. Historians still argue whether brothel workers had genuine control over their earnings or whether they were trapped in cycles of debt to the madams. Some accounts paint the women as shrewd entrepreneurs, stashing coins under floorboards and saving for a way out. Others suggest many lived hand to mouth, with debts for clothes, lodging, and food keeping them tied to the house indefinitely. As with most things, both realities likely coexisted. You suspect you'll find out soon enough which side of that argument applies to you. Tonight, you get your first taste of the economy firsthand. The timid clerk, the same one who blushed crimson earlier, finally gathers his courage to beckon you over. His hands shake as he digs into his pocket, producing a few silver shillings. He stammers through his request, and though his words blur with embarrassment, you understand well enough. You glance at the coins, then at his flushed face. You force a smile, remembering Clara's advice. Mystery sells more than desperation. You lean closer, letting your laughter spill softly, and his shoulders relax a little. The coins clink as he places them on the tray, and you feel the strange mix of power and dependence settle over you. The money is his, but the performance is yours. Neither can exist without the other, yet only one of you leaves lighter of pocket. You guide him toward the curtain, the parlor dimming behind you, and you can't help the thought that slips into your mind. You're less a person right now and more a currency exchange, trading laughter and illusion for shillings. It's absurd enough to make you smile genuinely, though he assumes it's for him. Back in the parlor later, you notice the madam counting again. She doesn't hide it. In fact, she makes a small show of it, her fingers clicking against the coins as she slides them neatly into piles. It's both practical and symbolic, reminding everyone who controls the flow. Workers may charm and coax, but the madam holds the scales. Clara sidles up beside you, muttering, "She could count in her sleep. Sometimes I think she does." You giggle quietly, picturing the madam dreaming of endless rivers of coins, the sound of shillings clinking like lullabies. The imbalance gnaws at you. For all your effort, your smiles, your aching ribs from the corset, your pay will barely cover food and lodging. Yet you watch clients toss coins onto tables carelessly, spilling drinks worth more than your day's wages. The disparity stings, though you swallow it down. You can't afford resentment. It won't buy bread. Here's another joke, one you keep to yourself. This house doesn't run on music or laughter. It runs on jingling pockets and bad math. You grin faintly at your own wit, though your chest aches a little. Humour helps, but it doesn't change the arithmetic. Historians still argue whether brothel economies offered women a sliver of independence or chained them tighter. Some say women gained more financial freedom here than in service or factory work, at least controlling their hours and earnings. Others insist it was exploitation disguised as choice. You don't need a historian to tell you the truth is slippery. Tonight you've seen both sides, moments of power, moments of powerlessness, all measured in silver and copper dot. By the time the candles burn low, the parlour looks littered. Empty glasses, crumpled handkerchiefs, and coins scattered across tables waiting for the madam's collection. You help tidy with the others, gathering stray shillings and smoothing rugs. Clara hums under her breath. Ada yawns. Betsy mutters jokes about charging the soldier for drool clean-up dot. And as you scoop up a stray coin from under a chair, you hold it in your palm for a moment, feeling its weight. Small, round, ordinary, and yet it governs everything here. Survival, comfort, illusion, even laughter. The parlour may glow with candlelight, but it's the glint of coin that truly lights the house dot. You slip the coin into the tray, your hand lingering briefly. You think to yourself, if money is the root of all evil, then perhaps it's also the root of survival, and in this house you'll need both. The parlour winds down at last, though the air is still thick with smoke and stale gin. Clients trickle out one by one, their boots clattering against the cobblestones outside. Ada stretches her arms with a groan and mutters something about soaking her fingers in vinegar to keep the stiffness away. Clara yawns dramatically, teasing that she deserves a medal for surviving another night without throttling a drunk. Even Betsy looks subdued, her curls limp with sweat, her cheeks flushed from laughter that by now feels forced dot. But before you can collapse into the hard bed upstairs, you learn another rhythm of this life. Moments of escape. Not grand departures or fairy tale rescues, but stolen fragments of freedom. 5 minutes here, a quarter hour there, hidden like treasures between the drudgery dot. The madam allows it so long as no one lingers too long. Perhaps she knows you'd all unravel without it. Perhaps she understands, because she once stole the same escapes herself dot. You slip quietly into the narrow courtyard at the back of the house. The night air hits you with a damp chill, fresh compared to the parlour's suffocating warmth. Overhead, the London sky is a blur of smoke, stars barely visible through the haze of chimneys. You tilt your head anyway, searching for constellations you can't name, and for a brief moment you forget the candlelight, the coins, the corset. You are simply a figure beneath the sky. A mainstream fact: London's air in the 19th century was infamous. Coal smoke from factories and homes created what contemporaries called pea soup fogs, thick enough to blot out the sun by day and choke lungs by night. Writers describe them as walls of darkness rolling through the streets, and doctors blamed them for rising rates of bronchitis and other respiratory illnesses. Tonight, the fog feels thinner, but the taste of soot still clings to your tongue dot. Clara joins you, a shawl thrown lazily around her shoulders. She exhales, a long sigh curling into the cool air. Best part of the night, she says softly. 5 minutes where nobody wants anything. She presses her shoulder against yours in quiet solidarity. The silence stretches, comfortable, broken only by the distant sound of carriage wheels. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorians believed that standing barefoot on grass at night could restore vitality, letting the earth draw out bad humours. You think of it now, imagining yourself slipping off your boots and pressing your toes into the damp ground, letting the mud swallow your weariness. But in this courtyard, there's only stone, patched with moss. You settle for leaning against the wall, pretending the bricks can siphon away your fatigue. Ada appears next, balancing a candle stub in a saucer. She sets it on the ground, creating a tiny island of light in the courtyard. To keep the ghosts away, she jokes, though her voice trembles with exhaustion. Betsy follows, humming a bawdy tune, and soon the four of you are gathered in the half-dark, sharing a silence that feels almost sacred. Historians still argue whether brothel workers had access to leisure or whether their lives were consumed entirely by labour. Some accounts emphasise relentless schedules with little time for rest or pleasure. Others suggest women carved out small freedoms, walks at dawn, stolen naps, moments like this courtyard gathering. The truth likely lies in fragments like these, fragile escapes that stitched sanity together one thread at a time. You lean back against the wall, closing your eyes briefly. The cool stone seeps through your gown, grounding you. You think of the clerk's nervous smile, the soldier's cough, the policeman's cold eyes. They blur together now, fading into the night. For these few minutes you are not a performer. You are simply a body breathing beneath a smoky sky. Clara whispers a joke, something about charging extra for clients who snore louder than the piano. Betsy snickers, muffling her laugh in her shawl. Ada mutters that she'd pay someone to sleep in silence for once. The laughter bubbles quietly, soft and genuine, like a spring in the middle of the city's soot. You laugh too, and the sound feels different, less sharp, less rehearsed. Then, almost reluctantly, Ada nudges the candle with her toe. "Time's up," she says. "You all know it's true. The madam will want the rooms tidied, the ledgers checked, the house readied for tomorrow. The illusion must reset before dawn. Still, as you step back inside, you carry the memory of the courtyard with you. The chill of the air, the faint stars hidden behind soot, the warmth of shoulders pressed together. Those moments will return, Clara promises. They always do. And you realize that without them, the nights would stretch too long, the weight too heavy. Escape may be brief, but it is everything. Back in the hallway, you glance up the staircase. The beds upstairs wait, hard and narrow, but tonight you'll sleep with the faint memory of sky above you. It's not much, but it's enough to soften the edges of exhaustion. And a final joke creeps into your thoughts as you climb the stairs. In this house, 5 minutes of fresh air costs nothing, though with London's fog, you'll probably still pay with your lungs. You chuckle softly, the sound swallowed by creaking boards, but it stays with you as you settle into bed. Moments of escape, you realize, aren't just luxuries here, they're lifelines. And tonight, the courtyard has given you just enough to face tomorrow. Morning light never truly reaches you inside these walls, but by the time another night begins, you've shaken the dust of sleep from your bones and stepped once more into the parlor. The air smells of wax and damp wood, but tonight it's laced with something else, a sense of mischief. Ada has tucked sprigs of lavender into her bodice. For luck, she claims, though she winks as though she's daring the universe to disagree. Betsy carries a horseshoe charm in her pocket which she swears keeps violent clients away. Clara rolls her eyes at both of them, but later you catch her muttering over a cracked playing card she insists works as a talisman. You realize quickly that this house isn't just ruled by coins and corsets, it's bound by quirks, strange Victorian beliefs that weave into daily life like invisible threads. Some make you laugh, others make you shiver, but all remind you how much superstition clings to the corners of the parlor. A mainstream fact, Victorians were famously obsessed with morality, medicine, and the supernatural, often mixing them together in ways that look bizarre to modern eyes. Phrenology, the belief that skull shape revealed character, was wildly popular, and fortune-tellers advertised as eagerly as chemists. Brothels caught between scandal and secrecy absorbed these ideas like sponges. You sit with Clara in the corner as she recounts how one client swore by carrying a rabbit's foot in his waistcoat. poor creature probably limps through the afterlife, she jokes, earning a laugh from Ada. Betsy tops her story with another. A patron who insisted the house must keep the windows open during thunderstorms so that evil spirits could flee on the lightning. Nearly froze us all, she mutters, but he tipped double, so we let him. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorian women believed that placing slices of raw beef on the face overnight could poison. Roar of youth. Imagine waking to find your pillow streaked with gravy. You snicker at the thought, and Clara pats your hand, saying, "Better beef than belladonna in the eyes, love." Historians still argue whether these beliefs were harmless amusements or dangerous distractions. Some suggest superstition gave women a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Others argue it led them to trust charms over doctors, worsening illness and despair. Watching Ada tuck lavender into her corset, you sense it's both a joke, a ritual, and a fragile thread of comfort. The madam tolerates these quirks with mild exasperation. "As long as you don't spill blood on the rugs," she mutters when Betsy suggests sprinkling salt at the doorway to ward off curses. Yet even she glances twice at a cracked mirror before ordering it thrown out. You file the observation away. For all her sharpness, even the madam bends to superstition when the shadows grow long enough. The clients, too, bring their quirks. One man insists on spinning his glass 3 times before drinking, convinced it wards off poisoning. Another asks for the piano to play only in minor keys, claiming major chords summon bad fortune. You smile politely, nodding along, and wonder how many of these oddities are born from genuine belief and how many from sheer eccentricity. Later that evening, a gentleman with a tall hat and round spectacles takes your hand, squinting at your palm with scholarly seriousness. "A long life," he murmurs, tracing the lines with a fingertip. "But many trials." Clara, watching from across the parlor, pretends to gag, earning a stifled laugh from you. Still, when he lets go, you glance at your palm, half expecting to see the future etched there. The air inside the parlor clings to you like damp velvet. You're barely 2 steps in before your senses are assaulted from all directions. Flickering gaslight, the squeak of boots on warped floorboards, and a piano note that twangs sourly as if the instrument itself is mocking the evening. You don't exactly have time to linger. Your eyes dart around, taking in the place, filing away the details, because here every creak and every scent is part of the world you now inhabit. The room is wider than you expected, though its ceiling sags slightly as if weary from holding up decades of smoke and laughter. A chandelier hangs overhead, though half the crystals are missing and the other half are dusty enough to dim what light they scatter. Still, it's better than the streets outside. You can almost pretend you've stepped into something respectable, a music hall perhaps, or a small hotel lounge, if you squint hard enough and ignore the heavily painted smiles of the women and the flushed, expectant grins of their guests. You catch sight of a velvet curtain separating the parlor from a narrower hallway, and you know instinctively what lies beyond. Rooms. Not glamorous suites, but cubbyholes where wallpaper peels in faded roses and mattresses sink in the middle like tired sighs. Some are upstairs, reached by the staircase you glimpsed earlier. The steps creak, the banister is loose, but that's not your problem right now. For the moment, your job is to blend in, to look as though you belong to this smoky, gin-stained dream. One mainstream fact you can cling to. Victorian London had thousands of establishments like this. Estimates run as high as 5,000 brothels during certain decades, depending on which historian you ask. Some were as modest as a single rented room with one worker. Others were entire houses, bustling with music, drinking, and whispered negotiations. The one you saw, tanding in, leans toward the latter, big enough to make noise but small enough to stay under the authorities' radar, at least most nights. The first man you notice is seated nearest the piano. His coat is expensive, wool trimmed with satin, but his boots tell another story. Mud caked around the soles suggests he's been somewhere far less elegant before dropping in here. He laughs too loudly at the pianist's mistakes, his hand drumming on the table in a rhythm no one else cares to match. Another guest, a soldier still half in uniform, slumps against a chair with his tankard tilted precariously close to spilling. Beside him, two women in corsets exchange glances, rolling their eyes as if to say, "Another night, another sloppy drunk dot." You, meanwhile, notice the peculiar perfume that hangs in the air. It's not the kind you'd find bottled in a fashionable shop. Instead, it's heavy, cloying, purchased from backstreet apothecaries who promise the scent of roses but deliver something closer to fermented fruit. The fragrance mixes with coal smoke from the fireplace, candle wax melting in uneven pools, and the unmistakable musk of damp wool coats drying by the fire. It's an aroma cocktail served nightly and free of charge. A quirky tidbit slides into your mind. Some Victorian households used onions as a form of air freshener, leaving bowls of them around rooms to absorb bad vapours. Imagine if the madam decided to decorate the brothel that way. You'd be serenading men with onion-scented whispers. Thankfully, this establishment prefers candles and perfume, though neither is particularly successful at masking the realities of sweat and gin. You lean against the parlor wall, fingers tracing the cracked plaster beneath the wallpaper. You feel eyes on you. Here, first impressions mean everything. A new worker is watched closely by the other women sizing you up for competition or camaraderie, and by the clients, ever curious for novelty. It's like being on stage the moment you step into the light, and whether you like it or not, the curtain has already risen. You hear stories, too, about ghosts that supposedly linger in houses like this one. Ada swears she once saw a woman in white drift across the upstairs hallway. Betsy counters with tales of rattling doorknobs and voices whispering when no one was near. Clara scoffs, but later admits she avoids the attic after dark. You can't help shivering a little, though you cover it with a joke. If ghosts are real, they should pay rent like the rest of us. A mainstream fact to ground you. Victorians had a well-documented obsession with spiritualism, particularly seances. Middle-class families gathered around tables, hands linked, waiting for raps and knocks from the beyond. Newspapers covered ghost sightings with the same seriousness as politics. In a world where death was ever present, cholera, tuberculosis, and child mortality, superstition was both coping mechanism and entertainment. In the parlor, these quirks weave into nightly life. A spilled drink becomes a bad omen, a sudden draught a sign of restless spirits. Laughter follows, but beneath it is a quiet need to believe that something beyond the walls explains the chaos, that fate or fortune offers patterns where society offers only judgment. Historians still argue whether such beliefs empowered women, giving them rituals of control, or whether they trapped them further in illusions. But you know tonight that superstition isn't just nonsense, it's balm. When Betsy sprinkles salt at the door, when Ada clutches lavender, when Clara mutters over her playing card, it steadies them. It steadies you. As the evening draws on, the quirks turn playful. Clara dares you to place a shoe under your pillow for luck. Betsy insists you spin 3 times before sipping gin, and you humour her, laughing so hard you nearly spill the glass. Ada declares that if the chandelier sways, it means the night will end with more tips than tears. You all laugh. Oak up at the swaying crystals, half expecting destiny itself to dangle from the chain. For a brief moment, superstition feels like freedom, like rewriting the rules of survival with charms and laughter instead of ledgers and coins. You know it's folly, but you cling to it anyway, because sometimes folly is the only shield you have. Before you climb the stairs that night, Clara presses her playing card into your palm. "Keep it," she whispers. "It's luckier in your hands." You slip it into your bodice, feeling the worn edges against your skin. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's everything. Either way, you smile. And as you settle into bed, you whisper one last joke to yourself. If superstition truly works, tomorrow's clients will arrive sober, polite, and rich. Which means I'd better not get my hopes up. The laughter is soft, but it carries you into sleep. Lavender and playing cards tucked close, the quirks of Victorian belief wrapping around you like a blanket stitched with nonsense and necessity alike. The next evening arrives with a different kind of tension, one that doesn't come from the fog outside or the creak of the chandelier overhead. Tonight, it drifts in through pamphlets left on street corners, through speeches shouted in public squares, through whispers that seep even into the parlour's heavy curtains. Reform is stirring in London, and its eyes are on women like you. You first hear of it when Ada tosses a crumpled flyer onto the table in the back room. The paper is smudged, the ink uneven, but the message is clear. Rescue the fallen women of our city. Beneath the headline is an illustration of a sad-faced young woman, hands clasped in prayer, with a cross floating above her head. Ada snorts, rolling her eyes, as if salvation comes printed on cheap paper. A mainstream fact, the mid to late 19th century saw a surge in social reform movements aimed at prostitution. Organisations like the Rescue Society and the Salvation Army campaigned to save women from brothels, offering shelter, work and moral rehabilitation. At the same time, laws like the Contagious Diseases Acts gave police sweeping powers to detain suspected prostitutes for forced medical examinations, often humiliating and dangerous. The contradictions are impossible to ignore. Reformers declare themselves saviours, yet many women describe their rescues as little more than prisons where daily routines were enforced with Bible readings and endless sewing, and the Contagious Diseases Acts. They claim to protect public health, but in practice they targeted women while leaving the men who visited them untouched. Clara leans back in her chair, blowing on her tea. You know what rescue means? Laundry. Endless laundry and sermons until your ears fall off. She smirks. I'd rather die in lace than in soap suds. Betsy cackles, nearly spilling her drink. Even Ada, who usually sighs at Clara's jage, okays, nods in agreement. Here's a quirky tidbit. Reform homes sometimes used cold baths as a method of moral discipline. Women who refused to pray or work could be plunged into icy water as punishment. The shock meant to cleanse them of sinful thoughts. You shiver at the thought, grateful for the cracked, drafty brothel where at least your bathwater isn't a weapon. Historians still argue whether these reform movements genuinely helped women or merely reinforced society's control over them. Some accounts describe women who successfully transitioned into new lives after entering reform homes. Others recount tales of despair, escape attempts, and women who return to brothels rather than endure moral incarceration. The debate is endless, each story adding another layer of complexity. In the parlor, reform isn't an abstract concept. Clients bring it up, sometimes with scorn, sometimes with smug pride. One gentleman waves his pamphlet like a badge of honour, declaring, "I gave a donation this week, doing my part to clean up London." Then he downs a gin and leans far too close to Ada, his hand sliding along her sleeve. Ada smiles sweetly, though later she mutters to you, "If he donates any more, I'll drown him in the collection plate." The hypocrisy stings, but it isn't new. Men preach morality by day, indulge desires by night, and blame women for the contradiction. You sip water disguised as gin, wondering whether reform is just another mask for control. The madam addresses the subject only once, in her office with the door shut. She tells you plainly, if they come for you, don't go quietly. But don't fight too hard either. A woman who claws at reformers ends up in worse places than laundry halls. She taps her ledger with sharp nails. Stay in my house, follow my rules, and you'll survive. Let them drag you out, and you may not return. Her words chill you more than any icy bath. Later that night, Clara slips another pamphlet into your hand. This one is bolder, with block letters screaming, "Protect our daughters from corruption." Beneath it is an image of a stern-faced man pointing accusingly at a shadowy female figure. You nearly laugh. "Looks like a theatre poster," you whisper. Clara grins. "If only we earned theatre wages." You tuck the pamphlet into your bodice, partly as a joke, partly as a reminder. Reform isn't just noise outside, it's a looming shadow that could one day push through the velvet curtain. The debate doesn't end in pamphlets or sermons, it seeps into conversations between the women in the kitchen. Betsy wonders aloud whether leaving might truly mean a better life, steady wages, fewer risks. Ada scoffs, claiming she'd rather die with a song in her throat than live sewing cuffs for pennies. Clara shakes her head, muttering that reformers don't want to save you, they want to tame you. You sit quietly, absorbing it all, torn between cynicism and fragile hope. A mainstream fact threads through your thoughts. Josephine Butler, a reformer of the era, campaigned fiercely against the Contagious Diseases Acts, arguing that they punished women unfairly while excusing men. She called it a system of cruelty and injustice, and her activism eventually led to the Act's repeal in the 1880s. Yet for decades, women endured the humiliation of forced examinations while reformers debated their futures like pawns. On a chessboard, historians still argue whether Butler's victory truly changed women's lives in brothels or whether it was just one battle in a larger war. Some hail her as a hero, others criticize her paternalism. You wonder what she'd think if she stepped into your parlor tonight. Would she scold, sympathize, or simply stare in horror? The night drags on, and clients continue their charades, preaching morality while tipping for music, joking about reformers while sneaking through the curtain. You laugh when expected, nod when necessary, but in the back of your mind, the pamphlets whisper, rescue, reform, regulation. None of it feels like salvation. It feels like another cage, gilded with promises you don't believe. Before bed, you return to the courtyard, slipping the pamphlet from your bodice. You hold it up to the smoky sky, the words, "Protect our daughters," smudged by damp fingers. You laugh softly, shaking your head. "Protect us from whom?" you whisper. The silence doesn't answer, but Clara's voice does. She joins you, wrapping her shawl tighter. "Protect us from men like them," she says. Then she snatches the pamphlet from your hand, crumples it, and tosses it into the gutter. You both watch it vanish into the dark, and you realize that reform isn't something you can count on. Survival still depends on laughter, coins, and camaraderie. Tomorrow, the pamphlets will return, the reformers will shout, and the brothel will endure, just as it always has. And as you crawl into bed, you think wryly, if reformers truly want to rescue us, they'd start by inventing a corset that lets you breathe. The joke is small, but it's enough to lull you towards sleep. Pamphlets and protests fading into the smoky London night. Another day drips away, and once more the lamps are lit, the curtains drawn, the piano coaxed into its nightly duty. But tonight you feel something shift inside you, a small rebellion stirring beneath the corset stays. The parlor hums as usual, coins clink, laughter fills the smoky air, yet your mind is elsewhere. You're dreaming, not of tokens and ledgers, but of futures beyond these walls. It begins innocently enough. Clara catches you staring at the chandelier, your eyes unfocused, and nudges you. "What's in your head, love?" she asks, smirking. You shrug. unwilling to confess, but she presses, and soon the words spill out. Do you ever think about something else? Another kind of life? Clara chuckles, shaking her head. Every day. Then the piano plays, and the dream scampers off like a rat. A mainstream fact: some brothel workers did manage to leave. Historical records describe women who saved enough to open shops, become dressmakers, or marry men willing to overlook or forget their pasts. Others joined reform homes with mixed results, but most never escaped. The cycle of poverty, stigma, and debt tethered them too tightly. Still, stories of escape floated like lanterns in the fog, offering fragile hope. You imagine it sometimes, owning a small tea shop with lace curtains where customers gossip about neighbours instead of paying for company, or perhaps travelling far from London to a coastal town where the air smells of salt instead of soot, where the only knocks on the door are from fishermen selling the day's catch. The images are soft, glowing, and you cling to them even as the parlour swallows you again. Here's a quirky tidbit. In Victorian times, emigration societies sometimes funded women to sail abroad, particularly to colonies like Australia, arguing there were too many women in London. The idea was to balance gender ratios overseas, though many women sailed abroad and found themselves in situations just as precarious as the ones they'd left. You picture yourself boarding a ship, skirts flapping in the sea wind, and laugh softly. Imagine trading one smoky prison for another across the world. Historians still argue whether dreams of escape were realistic or mere survival fantasies. Some say women genuinely plotted routes out, squirreling away coins and cultivating allies. Others suggest dreams were psychological lifeboats, keeping despair at bay even when escape was impossible. You can't decide which truth fits you because both feel familiar. Betsy interrupts your reverie with her usual laughter. She leans in close, whispering, "My dream, a bakery. Imagine it, flour in my hair instead of gin in my lap." You grin, imagining Betsy tossing loaves instead of tankards. Ada, overhearing, rolls her eyes. "I'll take a music hall, thank you very much. Somewhere my fingers earn applause instead of tipsy singing." Clara snorts, muttering, "I'd settle for a bed with feathers." The four of you laugh, the sound bubbling up from deep exhaustion. But for a moment it's genuine. The madam, overhearing, shakes her head with an indulgent smile. "Dreams are fine," she says, "as long as you don't let them trip your feet." You sense she once dreamed too, but the ledger in her office has long since replaced her lanterns in the fog. Later that night, as clients come and go, you find yourself gazing at the velvet curtain, imagining it leading somewhere else, out onto a stage perhaps, or into a shop, or even just into a quiet home of your own. The thought steadies you. For once, the curtain feels less like a cage and more like a doorway. But then the soldier coughs again, rattling the air, and reality snaps back. Dreams don't stop disease. The clerk fumbles coins into Clara's hand, and you remember, hope doesn't pay rent. Still, you tuck the dream into why. Our corset close to your heart, the way Ada tucks lavender. It doesn't have to be real tonight. It only has to be possible. A client notices your distant gaze and teases you. "What are you plotting, girl? Escaping us all?" You laugh, quick and rehearsed. "Just imagining what you'd look like with feathers," you reply. He chuckles, baffled but pleased, and the moment passes. Inside, though, you savour the absurdity. Maybe feathers aren't a dream, but laughter certainly is. You remember another mainstream fact. The Industrial Revolution brought new opportunities for women in factories, shops, and offices, though wages were meagre. Some historians argue brothels competed with these jobs, offering more money for fewer hours, at least in theory. You wonder if you'd choose the factory over the parlour if you had the chance. Would the clatter of machines be better than the piano's endless tunes? Would soot on your hands be lighter than rouge on your cheeks? Historians still argue whether brothel workers saw themselves as trapped or as practical. Did they dream of tea shops and feather beds, or did they simply endure night by night until endurance became its own life? Listening to Betsy joke about bakeries and Ada hum about music halls, you suspect both are true. Dreams and endurance aren't opposites. They're companions. Before bed, you slip once more into the courtyard. The fog is thicker tonight, wrapping the city in damp silence. You tilt your head upward, searching for stars, but the sky is blank. Still, you imagine them anyway. Constellations burning above the soot, guiding you somewhere else. Clara joins you, her shawl drawn tight. She whispers, "I'll save you, know, enough for a little shop. Sell buttons, maybe ribbons, anything." Her voice trembles, but her eyes are steady. You squeeze her hand, murmuring, "You will." Whether you believe it or not doesn't matter. The promise is enough. You return to your narrow bed with the dream still tucked in your chest, and as you drift toward sleep, you laugh quietly at a final thought. If I do open that tea shop, I'll name it the Velvet Curtain. At least then the drunks will know what they're walking into. The laughter fades slowly, carrying you into dreams where lace curtains flutter in clean air, where ledgers balance without tricks, where escape is not fantasy but fact. The parlor is buzzing again, but tonight feels different, charged, expectant, as though the candle flames themselves lean forward to listen. Rumors have been swirling for days. Someone important is coming. Not just another clerk or sailor or soldier, but someone whose name echoes beyond the brothel's walls. You feel it in the way the madam paces the floor with unusual urgency, straightening curtains, barking at Ada to tune the piano more carefully, checking her ledger twice as if numbers might misbehave. When the door finally creaks open, the air tightens. A man steps inside, his coat finely cut, his boots polished, his posture commanding. You don't know his name immediately, but whispers ripple across the parlor. A politician, some murmur. A poet, others claim. Betsy leans close to you, eyes wide. "That's him," she breathes. "He's written about in the papers." Whoever he is, his presence sparks a ripple of excitement and unease. A mainstream fact, brothels in Victorian London were frequented not just by anonymous labourers but by men of high rank, politicians, writers, even aristocrats. Records and scandals from the era show names that still echo in history books, though often hidden between the lines of polite biographies. Famous men risked everything by crossing these thresholds, yet many did, drawn by the promise of secrecy that rarely lasted. The man removes his gloves with deliberate grace, his eyes sweeping the room. They linger on Ada at the piano, on Clara's poised smile, on Betsy's playful wink. Then, for reasons you don't understand, they settle on you. He approaches, each step measured, as though this parlor is his stage and he is the lead actor. When he reaches you, he bows slightly, not mockingly, but with a touch of theatrical charm. "You must be new," he says. His voice is smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that's delivered speeches to crowds. You know, then your lips parting into the polite smile you've perfected. "And you murmur, "must be lost. This isn't the House of Commons." His laughter rings clear, surprising you with its warmth. Betsy, watching from across the room, nearly chokes on her drink. Here's a quirky tidbit. One scandal of the 19th century involved a famous London actor whose name appeared in a brothel's guest book. Though the madam denied it, gossip spread so widely that newspapers printed coded references for weeks. It didn't ruin his career. If anything, it boosted ticket sales. Hypocrisy has always been good for business. The man asks if he may sit, and you nod, though you know it's not really a question. He orders brandy, slipping coins onto the tray without hesitation. The weight of his gaze is heavy but not unkind. He asks about the music, about the mood of the room, even about your dreams, though you answer carefully. Every word feels like walking a tightrope. Say too much and you risk revealing yourself. Say too little and you risk losing his interest. Around you, the parlor hums differently. Men glance over, curious about what holds his attention. Women whisper to one another, calculating how his presence might affect their night. Even the madam watches from the corner, her eyes sharp, her ledger momentarily forgotten. Historians still argue whether encounters with the famous elevated women's status in brothels or simply heightened their risks. Some say notoriety brought protection. Important men wouldn't dare let harm come to their companions. Others argue it increased vulnerability because scandal always fell harder on the women than on the men. Watching the man smile at you, you wonder which truth tonight will hold. He leans closer, lowering his voice. "Do you know who I am?" he asks, his tone both playful and serious. You meet his gaze steadily. "Should I?" you reply. He laughs again, delighted, and raises his glass in mock salute. "Then let's keep it that way." You realize he wants anonymity as much as you do. In that, at least, you share common ground. The conversation drifts. He tells stories not too revealing, but flavored with wit. You laugh at his jokes, genuinely at times, and he seems pleased. He doesn't demand songs or dances. He wants words, exchanges, the illusion of intimacy. Perhaps that is his indulgence, not the act itself, but the company, the chance to speak freely in a place where no one records minutes or drafts laws. Clara passes by, raising an eyebrow in your direction. Later, she whispers, "Careful. Men like him remember only the parts that suit them." You nod, knowing she's right. The danger isn't in his smile, but in the weight of his name outside these walls. The night stretches, and though others drift behind the curtain, he remains in the parlor, content with brandy and conversation. The madam hovers, attentive but distant, clearly pleased at the coins he drops on the tray. When at last he rises to leave, he bows again, slipping a folded note into your palm. "For your time," he says softly, "and your wit." You don't open it until he's gone, the door shut behind him, the parlor exhaling in relief. Inside are not just coins, but a scrap of paper with a single line of poetry. You stare at the words, puzzled, uncertain if they are borrowed or his own. Either way, they settle into your chest like a strange gift, fragile, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. "Here's your joke for the night," whispered to Clara as you tuck the note away. "If I'm ever famous, I'll pay in potatoes instead of poetry. At least they can be boiled for supper." She laughs so hard she nearly spills her tea, the sound chasing away the heaviness of the evening. Still, as you climb into bed. Hours later, the note tucked beneath your pillow. You know this night will linger, not because of who he was, but because of what it revealed. Fame doesn't change the game. Coins still pass, rules still bind, and you remain a shadow in a city that both desires and condemns you. Historians still argue whether notoriety protected women in brothels or placed bigger targets on their backs. Tonight, as you trace the faint ink of his words, you decide the debate misses the point. What matters isn't his fame, it's your survival. And survival, like always, depends on wit, laughter, and the ability to carry secrets that others would crumble under. London does not stand still, and neither does the world inside the brothel. You begin to notice changes creeping in, not sudden but steady, like fog rolling through alleyways, until it is all anyone can see. The dresses arriving from second-hand shops are cut differently now, slimmer in the skirt, the bustled backs exaggerated. The music Ada tries at the piano shifts too. Instead of old jigs, she attempts polkas, tunes sweeping through the city from continental Europe. Even the lamps in the parlour glow brighter some evenings, replaced by newer gas fixtures that hiss softly, making candlelight seem almost old-fashioned. A mainstream fact, the second half of the 19th century was a period of rapid change in Britain. Industrial expansion, railways, the telegraph, even photography. Each invention altered how people lived, dressed, travelled, and saw themselves. Brothels were not immune. Patrons brought in gossip about inventions and fashions, and madams adapted to meet expectations, ensuring the parlor did not look like a relic. Clara complains one evening as she tugs at her bustle. "It's like dragging a sofa behind me," she groans, teetering on her heels. Betsy laughs so hard she nearly chokes on her drink, teasing, "At least if you fall, you'll land on a cushion." Ada mutters about having to learn waltzes, her fingers stumbling over new rhythms. The complaints are genuine, but beneath them you sense pride too. To keep up with changing times means to survive another season. Still, change is not always kind. Patrons talk about railways that carry people across the country faster than ever, and you wonder how many new faces will arrive in the city, some seeking fortune, others dragging hunger. More mouths in London mean more competition for every shilling, on the docks, in the factories, and here in houses like yours. The thought gnaws at you. Progress for some means press you. For others. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorians believed electricity, newly harnessed for lighting and machines, could also cure illness or stimulate health. Entrepreneurs sold electric belts and magnetic corsets, promising vigor, fertility, or relief from melancholy. You imagine a client swaggering into the parlor wearing one, buzzing faintly like a kettle, claiming he's irresistible now thanks to science. The thought makes you snort into your cup. Historians still argue whether technological change genuinely improved conditions for women in brothels. Some suggest new railways and communications expanded opportunities, bringing more patrons and widening clientele. Others argue these shifts increased instability, drawing younger, poorer women into the trade as cities swelled. The brothel, once a localized secret, became part of a larger, faster-moving economy. The madam adjusts too. She orders brighter lamps, insists on newer gowns, and lectures Ada about learning popular tunes. "If gentlemen hear a melody in the theatre," she says, "they'll want it here too. Keep them comfortable, keep them spending." She knows the rhythm of change, and she rides it like a carriage, steering the house where it must go. Yet change also creeps in through ideas. Reformers' pamphlets grow sharper, moral sermons louder, newspapers more daring in their scandals. Some clients enter the parlour whispering anxiously about regulations proposed in Parliament, about reforms that might shutter houses like this. Others laugh it off, boasting that brothels have always existed and always will. The debates seem distant, yet you feel their ripples here, in the uncertain hush that sometimes settles between songs. Clara voices what you've all been thinking. One day they'll build machines to scrub us clean of scandal. Until then, they'll keep pretending progress is everything, unless progress means us. Her sarcasm earns a weary laugh. The clientele changes with the times too. Younger clerks arrive, sharper dressed, with stories about telegraph offices buzzing with messages faster than horses can gallop. Sailors speak of steamships replacing wooden vessels, journeys shrinking from months to weeks. A man brags about having his photograph taken, his face captured in a tiny frame he can carry in his pocket. He shows it off proudly, though you think his eyes look far more tired on paper than in life. You can't help but wonder, will this photograph fade reach here? Will clients one day want portraits of the women they meet, souvenirs frozen in silver? The idea unsettles you. Secrets work because they vanish in the night. Photographs linger. You joke to Clara, "If anyone tries to take my picture, I'll charge double, per curl." She laughs, but her eyes flicker with unease. A mainstream fact. By the 1870s, photography studios dotted London, offering affordable portraits. Some even specialised in risque images, blurring the line between art and scandal. Historians debate how much brothels participated in this trade. Were women photographed willingly for extra income or coerced for profit? The record is murky, but the fear was real. Historians still argue whether progress brought liberation or deeper chains. Did brighter lamps, faster railways, and new fashions mean better lives, or simply more ways for society to watch, judge, and control? Standing in the parlor, corset laced tighter than ever, you sense both. Change brings opportunity, yes, but also exposure. Later comma in the kitchen. Betsy sighs dramatically. Give me one invention that makes the nights shorter, she groans. Ada Soggi. Est's a machine that plays piano automatically, freeing her fingers. Clara mutters, I'll take boots that walk home on their own. You laugh until your ribs ache, clutching the table for balance. Humour is your invention tonight, and it works well enough, But in bed later, staring at the cracked ceiling, you admit to yourself that change feels like a tide you cannot control. It sweeps through the city, through the brothel, through your very body, shaping how you dress, how you move, even how you dream. You can resist, you can joke, but you cannot stop it. You whisper into the dark, if progress ever invents a corset you can breathe in, then maybe I'll believe it's for me. The laugh that escapes is soft, but it steadies you. Change may never be kind, but at least it gives you something to mock, and mocking it, you realize, might just be its own form of survival. By now, the nights have blurred together, each one marked by the same clink of glasses, the same smoke curling above the chandelier, the same jokes whispered in corners, and yet the repetition does not make it easier. Instead, you feel the weight of it gathering in your body like coal dust in lungs. Every step, every smile, every breath pressed by the corset feels heavier than the one before. Exhaustion becomes its own companion. Your feet ache by evening, your back stiffens from standing too long, and your voice strains from laughter that doesn't belong to you. Ada's fingers, raw from pounding piano keys, are wrapped in cloth tonight, though she still plays because the music must go on. Clara coughs often, waving it off with a shrug, but her eyes betray the fatigue. Even Betsy's endless humour wears thinner, her giggles sharp around the edges. A mainstream fact, Victorian brothel workers often suffered from extreme fatigue and poor health, not only from disease but from sheer overwork. Long nights, irregular meals, alcohol-filled air, and the physical demands of performance left many aged before their time. Diaries and letters from reformers describe women who looked decades older than their actual age, their faces hollow from lack of rest. You feel it too. Tonight, as you stand in the parlour, smiling at a clerk's awkward story, you realise you can barely follow his words. The laughter you give him is mechanical, your lips stretched without thought. Your mind drifts even as your body performs. You are both present and absent, a marionette tugged by invisible strings. Clara leans close when the man leaves, whispering, "You've got the look. We all get it. Hollow eyes, hollow smile. Don't let it swallow you." Her warning is tender, but it rattles you more than the soldier's cough ever could. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorians swore by cod liver oil as a cure-all for exhaustion, weakness, and melancholy. It was spooned into children, patients, even factory workers, touted as liquid strength. You imagine the madam lining you all up with spoons, forcing down the foul-tasting oil before sending you back to the parlour. The thought makes you gag and laugh at the same time. Historians still argue whether resilience in brothels was a form of strength or simply necessity disguised as virtue. Some claim women forged toughness that defied their circumstances, while others suggest survival was less about choice and more about being trapped in systems that offered no exit. Looking at Clara's weary cough and Ada's bandaged hands, you see both truths. Survival feels powerful, yet it also feels like chains. The toll isn't only physical. Emotionally, you sense pieces of yourself wearing thin. Every night you perform intimacy for strangers, and though you laugh at jokes, feign interest in stories, and allow clumsy compliments, inside you feel emptier. It's like pouring water into cups until your own well runs dry. You wonder how long you can keep filling others before nothing remains. The madam notices, of course. She always does. One evening she pulls you aside, her eyes sharp. "Hold your shoulders up," she instructs. "Clients don't pay for fatigue." Her words sting, not cruelly but matter-of-factly. You nod, forcing your spine straight, but later you sag again, your body betraying the act. Yet even within the exhaustion, resilience weaves itself quietly. In the kitchen after hours, you and the others collapse onto benches, sharing scraps of bread and weak tea. Betsy tells another ridiculous story, this one about a client who tried to pay her with a jar of pickled onions. Ada groans dramatically, muttering she'd rather starve. Clara wheezes from laughing so hard, and you find yourself laughing too, genuinely, even through the ache in your ribs. Laughter doesn't erase fatigue, but it softens it, makes it survivable. Another mainstream fact. Reformers often described brothel women as broken, hopeless, beyond redemption, but letters and rare testimonies from the women themselves reveal humor, camaraderie, and stubborn endurance. They joked, teased, and found levity amid hardship, proving that resilience doesn't always roar, it often whispers between sips of tea. Historians still argue whether this resilience was empowerment or illusion. Did women truly claim strength, or did they simply mask pain with laughter because nothing else was available? You don't need a scholar to tell you the answer. Tonight, as Betsy pretends to faint from the smell of Ada's vinegar-soaked fingers, you know the laughter is real. It doesn't erase the toll, but it makes it bearable. Later, as you walk the hallway toward your bed, the wooden boards groan beneath your steps. You feel the weight of the day pressing into your bones, but you also hear the faint giggles from the kitchen echoing after you. Both exhaustion and resilience travel with you, like shadows paired together. You pause at the crooked mirror, staring at your reflection. The rouge has faded, your hair is limp, your eyes ringed with dark circles. You barely recognize yourself. And yet, beneath the tired face, you see stubbornness too, the refusal to collapse, the will to keep moving even when every muscle protests. Stubbornness may not be glamorous, but it is strength all the same. You whisper a final joke to yourself before climbing into bed. If fatigue were fashionable, I'd be the most stylish woman in London. The laugh that escapes is small, almost pitiful, but it carries enough warmth to follow you into dreams. The toll is heavy, yes, but the resilience is heavier still, and tonight that balance tips just enough to let you rest. The piano hits another sour note and laughter bubbles up from a corner. A man in a top hat, his cheeks flushed with drink, claps as though the error were deliberate comedy. The pianist, one of the girls tonight, not a hired musician, shoots him a wry glance and carries on gamely. Music is as much armor as entertainment. It fills awkward silences, distracts from the draft seeping under the door, and offers everyone an excuse to pretend this is simply a lively gathering. Historians still argue whether such brothels were tolerated by local communities or despised outright. Some records show neighbours lodging endless complaints, while other accounts suggest a quiet tolerance as long as the noise didn't spill too loudly into the streets. After all, these houses attracted paying customers who often tipped generously, spreading coins not only inside the brothel but also across local taverns and markets. Hypocrisy ran thick, moral outrage by day, casual indulgence by night. The madam's voice cuts across the parlor, commanding attention without shouting. You spot her standing near the curtain, her gown darker and more sober than the others, her hair pulled into a severe bun that brooks no nonsense. She doesn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone commands obedience. She glides through the room, adjusting a ribbon here, nodding at a client there, her eyes missing nothing. If the brothel is a stage, she is both director and critic, and everyone performs better under her gaze. You're acutely aware of how your own presence registers with her. Newcomers don't escape scrutiny. The way you carry yourself, the way you smile, or don't, will all be tallied and remembered. Later, perhaps, she'll call you into the back room for a lecture on rules. For now, she lets you observe, a silent test of how quickly you absorb the unspoken codes. The soldiers at the table call for another round of drinks. A boy, barely a teenager, scurries forward with a tray of glasses. He isn't a worker in the same sense you are. He's hired for errands, fetching gin from the cellar and carrying messages between rooms. His wide eyes and nervous hands suggest he's still adjusting to this atmosphere. You wonder briefly if he'll last. Most don't. As you watch, you realize that every object in the room serves a purpose, no matter how battered. The cracked mirror reflects candlelight enough to make the space feel fuller. The velvet curtain, fraying at the hem, still hides the hallway beyond, preserving a semblance of privacy. Even the chandelier, half broken, throws just enough fractured brilliance to convince patrons they've entered a world set apart from their own dreary lodgings. One of the clients, a man with a red scarf wrapped around his neck, leans toward you, attempting small talk. His words slur slightly, but you catch the gist. Where are you from? How long have you been here? What do you think of London? You answer carefully, never too much detail, because part of the job is creating mystery. Patrons don't really want the whole truth. They want the illusion of intimacy, the sense that they've uncovered a secret. You smile faintly, tilting your head just enough to keep him intrigued. A joke slips from one of the women across the room, something about the soldier's boots being shinier than his wits, and laughter ripples through the group. You find yourself chuckling too, though more out of camaraderie than genuine amusement. Humor here is like a safety valve. Without it, the tension would choke you. It's a shared language, keeping spirits afloat in a world where exhaustion presses down like damp fog. The night stretches ahead. You're only beginning to learn how to pace yourself, how to conserve energy for the long hours to come. The parlor hums with false cheer, and you stand in the middle of it all, watching, listening, breathing in the peculiar perfume of secrecy. Every impression you gather now will shape how you navigate the brothel tomorrow, and the night after that, and the endless procession of nights still waiting in the flicker of gaslight. The hum of conversation drifts like smoke through the parlor, but soon it parts to reveal her, the madam. You notice her before anyone introduces you, because the room seems to tilt slightly in her direction. She isn't dressed in the flamboyant corsets and bright ribbons the other women wear. No, her gown is darker, heavier, almost severe, with fabric that whispers authority rather than enticement. The sheen of satin at her cuffs is subtle but deliberate, a reminder that money funnels toward her first, and everyone else receives their share only after her careful accounting. She stands near the velvet curtain, eyes scanning the parlor with an intensity that feels both maternal and predatory. She catches every detail, the half-drunk soldier slurring a song, the girl at the piano playing a little too fast, the coins exchanged at the table nearest the window. You realize instantly that nothing escapes her. She is the conductor of this strange orchestra, keeping chaos just shy of collapse. When she approaches you, it's not with warmth exactly, but with the measured appraisal of someone who has seen dozens like you step nervously into her domain. Her gaze lingers on your shoes, your posture, the way you hold your hands. In another life she might have been a governess, or perhaps a shopkeeper with a loyal clientele, but here she is something else entirely, a figure who blends caretaker and tyrant, opportunity and danger. Mainstream fact about these women: many madams in Victorian London were themselves former workers who had clawed their way upward. Some managed to save enough to rent or purchase a house, leveraging experience and contacts to establish their own establishments. In some cases, they earned more independence and wealth than most women of their era could dream of. Yet that independence came with constant risk, of police raids, of rival houses, of the ever-looming judgment of society. She speaks to you in a tone that brooks no argument. You stand straighter, smile when you must, but never too eagerly. These men pay for fantasy, not for desperation. Her voice is low, calm, but sharp enough to cut through the din around you. She explains the basic rhythm of the house. Evenings begin in the parlor, with music and drink. Clients are sized up, courted with conversation, laughter, sometimes a gentle touch on the arm. Only later do they slip through the velvet curtain to the smaller rooms beyond. You nod, trying to absorb it all, though your thoughts flit nervously between curiosity and unease. She notices the flicker in your eyes and arches a brow. Fear is useful, she says simply. It keeps you cautious, but do not let it make you sloppy. Here's your quirky tidbit of the evening. Some madams in Victorian England advertised their houses in coded language within newspapers. A boarding house for gentlemen with lively music and fine company was often little more than a thinly veiled invitation to a brothel. Imagine flipping through the classifieds sandwiched between ads for chimney sweeps and piano lessons, and stumbling across what was essentially an RSVP to scandal. The madam leads you a few steps deeper into the parlor, placing a hand briefly on your shoulder. Her touch is surprisingly firm, grounding you as though staking her claim. You belong to her house now, and everyone who sees you will understand that fact. Other workers glance over, some with measured welcome, others with suspicion. A new arrival means the pie is divided one slice thinner, but it also means fresh entertainment for the clients. An asset in its own right. Historians still argue whether madams were protectors or exploiters. Some argue they offered stability and shelter in a society that left women few choices, even enforcing rules meant to keep their workers safer than the streets ever could. Others paint them as profiteers, enriching themselves on the vulnerability of women with nowhere else to turn. The truth, as always, probably wavered somewhere between those extremes, shifting with each madam's personality and priorities. She doesn't linger long. After delivering her quiet instructions, she sweeps away to tend to another matter, a spilled drink near the piano, a patron raising his voice too loudly. She extinguishes small sparks of chaos before they ignite into flames. It's a delicate balancing act, part hospitality, part policing. And she does it all while projecting an air of cool command, as though she were managing a drawing room soiree rather than a business skirting the edges of legality. You continue to watch her throughout the evening, fascinated by the way she threads through the chaos. At one moment she is smiling at a gentleman's joke, her laugh smooth and practiced, though you can tell her eyes never soften. The next, she is whispering sharply to one of the workers, reminding her to mind her manners or straighten her bodice. Later, she passes you again, her hand brushing yours briefly. The unspoken message clear: stay observant, stay useful. And you'll stay in her good graces. Your mind drifts to the fact that outside these walls, the same woman would be shunned, dismissed as immoral, even monstrous. Yet within, she holds more authority than many men who come knocking at her door. It's an odd kind of kingdom she rules, precarious, hidden, constantly under siege from moral crusaders and opportunists alike. But it is hers, and she maintains it with a precision that impresses you even as it unsettles you. At one point, the soldier in the corner grows too loud, slamming his tankard on the table until beer sloshes onto the rug. The madam doesn't raise her voice. She simply appears at his side, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her words barely audible. Yet within seconds his posture slackens, his volume dims, and he returns to murmuring drunkenly instead of shouting. Whatever she whispered, it worked. Authority here doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and men listen all the same. You find yourself imagining her past. Did she once stand nervously where you do now, fumbling with her smile, waiting for instruction? Did she have a mentor who showed her the ropes, or did she carve her path through sheer stubborn survival? You'll never know the whole truth, but her presence alone tells you enough. She has learned every trick, every weakness, every way to bend a situation to her advantage. As the night stretches on, the parlour buzzes with laughter and murmurs, music and footsteps. But through it all, you keep noticing her glance cutting through shadows, her voice smoothing frayed tempers, her ledger waiting in the back room where coins are tallied like prayers. This is her house, her stage, and you're now a player in her script. You may not yet know your role fully, but she does, and if you're wise, you'll follow her lead until you learn to improvise your own. By the time the last notes from the piano drift into silence, you've realized something crucial. The madam isn't just a figure in the background. She's the pivot around which this entire world turns. And like it or not, your survival here will depend on her approval more than on any gentleman's fleeting coin. The first thing you feel is the tug at your ribs. The madam has directed you upstairs, where the wardrobe sits like a miniature stage set. In this room, you transform, not into a different person exactly, but into the version of yourself the house needs tonight. The mirror in the corner leans slightly forward, its frame carved with cherubs long since chipped by time. When you catch your reflection, the glass blurs your features, as if trying to warn you. Prepare to become someone else. A worker named Clara hovers near the wardrobe, her hands quick and practiced. She's been here long enough to know the tricks. She tosses you a corset that looks both beautiful and menacing, a cage disguised as clothing. The stays are stiff, the lace is endless, and as she yanks them tighter, you feel your lungs compress, your ribs protesting with each breath. "Don't faint in the parlour," she says with a half smile. It ruins the mood. Her joke lands, though your laugh wheezes more than it chuckles. Corsetry in the Victorian age was both fashion and torment. A mainstream historical fact, by the mid-19th century, tight lacing was a widespread practice, with some women reducing their waistlines to under 20 inches. Medical journals of the time fretted over corset disease, blaming the garment for everything from deformed ribs to fainting spells. Yet despite criticism, corsets remained a symbol of refinement, shaping not just bodies but also reputations. In a brothel, however, refinement meant survival, and comfort never made the cut. Clara shows you how to layer the gown over the corset, a cascade of fabric that looks opulent even if it smells faintly of mothballs. The bodice is cut low, revealing more than polite society ever permitted. Though here it is precisely the point. Lace trims the sleeves, though one thread dangles loose, threatening to unravel. You pinch it nervously, but Clara slaps your hand away. Leave it. No one notices after the third drink. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorian beauty routines included using belladonna drops in the eyes to dilate pupils, giving a wide, innocent look. Of course, belladonna is poisonous and repeated use could damage vision permanently. But in a world where appearances carried more weight than health, plenty of women took the risk. Lucky you only have to endure the corset tonight, not a lifetime of fuzzy eyesight. The madam steps into the wardrobe room without knocking, her presence as commanding here as in the parlour. She surveys your attire with the precision of a general inspecting a uniform. "Posture," she says, tapping your shoulder blades. You straighten instinctively, ignoring the pinch of the corset digging into your sides. "Smile," she adds, watching the corners of your mouth stretch. Not too wide. Mystery sells more than desperation. Historians still argue whether the elaborate fashion of Victorian brothels was meant to mimic high society or mock it. Some claim the gowns and jewellery were imitations, purchased second-hand from wealthier women, meant to give clients the illusion of mingling with ladies of class. Others suggest the flamboyance was deliberate parody, thumbing its nose at a society that condemned yet secretly indulged. Either way, every ribbon, every corset string, every painted cheek was a costume tailored to the fantasies of the night. You adjust your stockings, noticing the uneven dye that stains them a blotchy grey. Clothing here is recycled endlessly, mendy. ed and repurposed until fabric frays beyond repair. The madam spares no expense where appearance counts, but the finer details reveal the truth. Your shoes, though polished, have soles worn thin. A tiny hole near the toe lets in the faint chill of London air. Yet from a distance, by candlelight through the haze of smoke and drink, no one will notice. Illusion works best when viewed through a fog. Clara powders your face with a puff that smells faintly of rice starch. The effect is ghostly, your skin pale as porcelain, though the candlelight will soften the starkness. Rouge is applied sparingly, a blush meant to hint at vitality rather than excess. Lip colour is darker than you expected, a shade that whispers danger and allure in equal measure. You study yourself in the crooked mirror again and almost laugh at the transformation. A few hours ago, you were a nervous newcomer in plain clothes. Now, you are a figure from the gaslit dream, packaged for performance. As Clara works, she mutters stories about past clients, the eccentric who demanded to be sung lullabies, the aristocrat who insisted on debating politics mid-encounter, the sailor who swore he'd seen mermaids and wanted to compare anatomy. You smile, not sure if she's serious or simply trying to lighten the mood. Either way, the anecdotes serve as both warning and welcome. Expect the unexpected, because predictability has no seat in this parlor. The madam nods approvingly before sweeping back into the hallway, leaving behind the faint scent of lavender water clinging to her gown. Clara finishes pinning your hair, smoothing stray strands with fingers sticky from pomade. There, she says, good enough to fool anyone who wants to be fooled. You thank her, though your lungs beg for mercy beneath the corset's grip. The evening bell rings downstairs, a small brass chime struck by the errand boy. It signals the arrival of more patrons, perhaps a cluster spilling in from nearby taverns. The sound ripples through the house, stirring energy like a conductor raising a baton. You take one last glance in the mirrors. Your reflection stares back, both familiar and foreign. You've become the person the house needs, corseted and powdered, dressed not for comfort but for survival. And here's a joke for you, whispered in your own head as you descend the creaking staircase. With your waist cinched this tightly, you could probably qualify as your own hourglass timer. Just flip you over and wait for the gin to run out. The parlour greets you with its usual cacophony. Piano notes clashing, men laughing, glasses clinking. But now you notice the shift in how they look at you. The attire, the rouge, the posture, all of it commands a different sort of attention. You're no longer invisible. You're a piece of theatre stepping onto the stage. And the audience has noticed. As the night unfolds, you realise that dressing the part isn't just about pleasing clients. It's also about shielding yourself. The corset, the gown, the paint on your face, all of it forms a barrier between who you are and who you must appear to be. Behind the lace and the powdered cheeks, your true self remains hidden, tucked away like contraband under the floorboards. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only way you'll get through the nights ahead. The parlour hums steadily, and you realise that the real rules of this house aren't written anywhere. They live in the glances, the gestures, the little corrections whispered in your ear. But tonight, the madam decides it's time you hear them spoken. After all, every actor in a play must learn their lines before stepping into the spotlight. She beckons you toward the back hallway, past the velvet curtain that hides the staircase. Her office isn't glamorous, just a small room with ledgers stacked on a desk, a chipped teacup half full of something dark, and a chair that looks as though it might collapse if anyone heavier than her sat on it. She shuts the door with a soft click, and instantly the din of the parlour drops to a muted hum. You'll learn quickly, she begins, her eyes locking on yours, or you won't last. Her voice is calm but carries the weight of certainty. She explains the basic commandments of survival in her house, and you realise they are equal parts common sense and strange ritual. First, never get too drunk. Clients may drown themselves in gin, but you must never let your own wits slip. A clear head means sharper instincts, and sharper instincts mean fewer mistakes. A drunk worker, she explains, is an easy target for both clumsy men and cruel ones. Second, always protect each other. Rivalries may simmer, but in the end, the workers in this house are each other's lifelines. If a client grows rough, if money is withheld, if danger creeps too close, the others will notice, if they're loyal. And if they aren't, well, trouble multiplies quickly in a house like this. Third, never cross the madam herself. Her word is law, and while she doesn't shout, she enforces rules with the kind of quiet, surgical precision that leaves no doubt of her control. She gestures toward the ledger on the desk, rows of neat handwriting recording names, payments and notes. Everything passes through me, she says. Every coin, every complaint, every favour. You work under my roof, you play by my rules. Those who don't. She lets the silence finish the sentence. A mainstream fact backs her up. Many brothels of Victorian London ran under strict house rules, often written out and posted where workers could see them. Some rules governed dress, speech, even how long a client was allowed to stay in a room. Violations could mean fines, reduced pay, or expulsion. For all the chaos that seemed to swirl inside these houses, they operated with a level of order that mirrored, in its own way, the strict codes of the society that shunned them. She leans back slightly, sipping from her chipped cup. You notice her gaze flicker to the window, where faint lamplight from the alley leaks through the curtains. The law pretends to despise us, she says softly, almost to herself. But it watches, and sometimes it profits. She doesn't elaborate, but you understand. Rules don't only apply inside, they extend outward, shaping how the house survives in a city that simultaneously condemns and relies on its existence. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some brothels enforced no kissing rules. The act was considered too intimate, reserved for genuine affection rather than purchased performance. Imagine that. You could laugh, dance, sing and flatter, but a simple kiss on the lips was where the line was drawn. Strange boundaries in a world that was already a labyrinth of contradictions. She continues listing rules, some practical, some peculiar. Never light more than 2 candles in a room. The cost adds up quickly. Always keep an eye on your stockings. Men have a habit of accidentally keeping them as souvenirs. And perhaps the strangest of all, never speak of your true name unless absolutely necessary. Names carry power, she warns, and once given away, they can be used against you. Historians still argue whether such house rules were genuinely protective or just another way for madams to maintain control. Some scholars suggest the strictness shielded women from the worst dangers, creating a fragile bubble of stability. Others claim the rules mostly protected profits, ensuring the madam's control over both the workers and the flow of money. As with so much of this hidden world, the truth likely shifted depending on the house, the woman running it, and the ever-changing pressures of the streets outside. You sit quietly, nodding, trying to remember every detail. The madam doesn't expect you to memorize it all in one night, but she expects you to try. She watches your face carefully, perhaps testing whether you'll flinch at certain words, whether you'll bristle against her authority. When you meet her gaze steadily, she finally nods. Good, she says. You'll do. Before dismissing you, she offers one last piece of advice, softer than the rest. Find something to laugh about each night. Without it, the work will devour you. And then, as if embarrassed by her own tenderness, she waves you out of the room, already turning back to her ledger. You re-enter the parlor, and the noise washes over you again. The rules echo in your head like a list of commandments carved into invisible stone. Never too drunk, protect each other, obey the madam, guard your name, count your stockings. The absurdity makes you want to smile, but you know it isn't absurd at all. It's survival wrapped in routine. The pianist strikes up another tune, this one faster, more playful. A soldier belts out the chorus with gusto, sloshing his drink across the table. You lean against the wall, breathing carefully in your corset, and realize you've just crossed a threshold. You're no longer simply observing the brothel, you're becoming part of its rhythm, its rituals, its unspoken agreements. And for the first time tonight, you catch yourself laughing, not at anything particularly funny, but at the sheer strangeness of it all. You laugh softly, knowing that somewhere in the shadows, the madam would approve. Back in the parlor, the music and chatter surge like a tide, and now you notice the real show isn't the piano, it's the audience. Clients sit scattered across mismatched chairs and sofas, each man carrying his own story, his own peculiarities, his own reason for being here. Some are familiar types you could spot from a mile away, while others are harder to place. The madam warned you, read the room before you engage. So, tonight, you let your eyes wander, cataloguing them like strange specimens in a cabinet of curiosities. Near the fire, two gentlemen in tailored suits huddle together, whispering with the intensity of conspirators. Their watch chains glimmer, and their shoes are polished to a near mirror shine. These men aren't here because they can't afford better. They're here because places like this offer freedom from the stiff etiquette of their drawing rooms. In polite society, they must bow, scrape, and flatter. Here, they pay for the right to drop their masks, to indulge without risk of gossip in the papers. Across the room, a soldier sprawls, his uniform jacket unbuttoned. His cheeks are ruddy, his voice loud, and he alternates between boasting about battles you doubt he ever fought and humming half-forgotten marching tunes. You notice the way his eyes glaze when he stares at the fire, perhaps remembering something he doesn't want to admit. Alcohol fills the gaps where his words stumble. Soldiers are common guests. Some spend half their wages here in one night, returning to the barracks with empty pockets and heavy heads. Near the piano sits a man who looks entirely out of place. His hands are stained with ink, his coat slightly threadbare, and his eyes dart nervously every time someone addresses him. A clerk, you guess, maybe an apprentice to a solicitor or an accountant. He probably saved for weeks just to afford this evening, clutching coins with sweaty alms before sliding them across the madam's desk. Men like him come seeking not only pleasure but validation, that they too can claim a night in the company of beauty, a brief escape from ledgers and candlelit offices. And then there are the travellers. You notice one with a weathered face, his accent thick when he orders gin, his boots are sturdy, his hands calloused, and you wonder if he's come straight from the docks. Sailors are notorious patrons. Some bring stories of foreign lands, sprinkling their conversation with tales of jungles and storms. Others spend recklessly, knowing they may not return from their next voyage. You feel a flicker of sympathy for him. The sea takes as much as it gives, and tonight he seems desperate to forget that truth. A mainstream fact slides into your thoughts. Victorian London was a melting pot of clientele when it came to brothels. Records from police raids describe gentlemen rubbing elbows with labourers, officers mingling with clerks, and foreigners joining locals. Brothels served as one of the few spaces where class divisions softened, if only temporarily. Inside these walls, money was the only true passport. It wasn't only men who appeared. Occasionally, you'd hear whispers of women visiting, sometimes widows seeking companionship, sometimes curious aristocrats cloaked in secrecy. Those encounters were rare, but they reinforced the brothel's odd role as a place where societal lines blurred, if not vanished. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some brothels kept guest books where men signed false names or left humorous notes, treating the evening like a bizarre hotel stay. Historians discovered one entry where a man described himself as Lord of Nowhere and his companion as Her Majesty of Mischief. Imagine flipping through those pages, a hidden anthology of half-drunken alter egos. You shift your attention to the way the workers interact with clients. It's not random, there's a rhythm to it. One woman leans in close to laugh at a joke that wasn't funny, her hand brushing lightly against a sleeve. Another dances playfully near the piano, drawing attention without ever stepping too close. Each maneuver is strategic, designed to lure without appearing desperate, to flatter without surrendering dignity. You realize quickly that much of the work is less about physicality and more about performance. Historians still argue whether clients came seeking intimacy, escape, or simply entertainment. Some accounts emphasize the transactional nature, coin for companionship. Others suggest many men came not solely for desire, but for conversation, for the illusion of being understood in ways their wives or colleagues could not provide. It's impossible to pin down one truth because human needs are never that simple. You're nudged by Clara, the worker who laced your corset earlier. She leans close and whispers, "That one, by the window, don't bother, never tips." You glance discreetly. The man she's pointing at is dressed well enough, but his smile is tight, his eyes calculating. She knows from experience who is worth the effort and who isn't. Her warning reminds you that the job isn't just about attention. It's about strategy, deciding where to invest energy when the night can stretch endlessly. Your thoughts drift briefly to the hypocrisy outside. Many of these men will return home tomorrow to families, to offices, to pews in church where they'll nod solemnly about morality. Some will vote for reform laws meant to clean up the streets, conveniently forgetting the coins they dropped here tonight. The brothel is both their guilty secret and their sanctuary, a contradiction that fuels the very cycle society claims to despise. You notice the clerk again, fiddling, with his glass nervously, as though afraid it might shatter under his grip. Something about his hunched posture makes you want to laugh gently and tell him to relax. He reminds you of a schoolboy sneaking into forbidden territory. Yet you know better than to treat him like a child. He has coins, and in this world that grants him temporary power. The soldier bursts into another round of song, and the others join in half-heartedly. One of the women tosses her head back in exaggerated laughter, though you can see the flicker of exhaustion in her eyes. It's a performance, always a performance. You find yourself thinking of the rules the madam outlined earlier, realizing they weave invisibly into the way everyone here behaves. No one is drunk enough to lose control. Everyone keeps an eye on each other, even through the haze of jokes and music. Survival isn't just about your own choices. It's about how well you blend into the ensemble. The night stretches, and the clientele shifts. A group of younger men stumble in, their coats still damp from rain. Their laughter is brash, their wallets fat, and the parlour's energy swells. The madam's gaze flickers across them, calculating how best to distribute her workers to maximize profit without losing control of the atmosphere. You watch the strategy unfold silently, realizing how much of this world is built on managing personalities as much as transactions. For a moment, you allow yourself a smirk. The soldier sings the same verse for the third time. The clerk finally loosens enough to smile at Clara's jokes, and one of the gentlemen near the fire sneezes so violently his wig shifts an inch. You bite back a laugh, but in your head you quip, "Ah yes, nothing like romance under a chandelier held together by dust and sheer optimism." Still, the absurdity is grounding. It reminds you that beneath the layers of hypocrisy, beneath the orsets and the coins, this place is just people fumbling through the night, sometimes lonely, sometimes ridiculous, often both. You belong to the house now. The night draws to a close again, but this time you feel something different in the air, a quiet reckoning. The parlour is almost empty, only the faint smell of extinguished candles and spilled gin lingering in the silence. Ada has gone upstairs, her hands wrapped carefully in cloth. Clara snores faintly in the corner, curled like a cat with her shawl as blanket. Betsy is still awake, humming softly as she tidies glasses, her song too low for anyone but you to hear. You sit at one of the worn tables, staring at the crooked mirror across the room. For the first time in many nights, you are not distracted by the clients or the music or the endless coins slipping from hand to hand. Tonight, you see yourself clearly, not the rouge-painted smile or corseted figure, but the weary body and sharp mind that have carried you through. You think back on the journey, how the gaslit streets first swallowed you in their shadows, how the madam measured you with a single glance, how Clara pulled the corset string so tight you swore you'd faint. You remember the rules whispered in back rooms, the laughter sparked by cheap gin, the stigma that clung like soot even when the curtains were closed. You recall the coughs, the doctors with chalk powders, the lemon peels and nutmeg charms passed around like sacred relics. You remember the friendships, the chipped teacups in the kitchen, the shawls shared in the courtyard, the laughter that stitched the nights together. You remember the policeman at the door, the purse of coins in their hands, and the politician poet whose note still lies hidden beneath your pillow. Every piece of it forms a tapestry, and as you stare into the crooked mirror, you realize you've become both its thread and its weaver. A mainstream fact: historians often debate whether women in Victorian brothels were victims, rebels, survivors, or some tangled mix of all three. The records left behind, court documents, reformers' pamphlets, gossip columns, paint portraits that are either tragic or scandalous, but the truth, historians admit, is more complex. Women laughed, dreamed, endured, and carried on, weaving lives too intricate to fit neatly into moral categories. You lean back in your chair, the wood groaning under your weight, and let the memories drift. Ada's lavender sprigs, Betsy's endless jokes, Clara's whispered plans for a button shop. Even the madam's sharp eyes counting coins as though survival itself were measured in neat stacks of silver. Each detail is heavy, yet together they tell a story not of ruin, but of endurance. Here's a quirky tidbit. One reformer once described visiting a brothel and being shocked to find the women laughing. He wrote that their mirth seemed inappropriate, as though joy and survival could not exist in the same room. You chuckle softly, imagining his face, bewildered that women might cling to humour even in the shadows. If only he knew that laughter was the strongest thread in the whole tapestry. Historians still argue whether brothels should be remembered as sites of tragedy or as hidden communities of resilience. Sitting here now, you feel the answer settling quietly in your chest. Both. The toll was real, the fatigue, the stigma, the danger. But so was the resilience, the jokes, the small dreams, the stubbornness to face another night. The mirror catches your reflection once more, and this time you smile faintly. You are tired, yes, but you are also alive. In a city that judges and condemns, that pretends not to see even as it depends on you. That is no small victory. The candles gutter low, and Betsy finally sets aside her tray, murmuring, "Time for bed, love." You nod, rising slowly, your bones heavy, but your heart steadier than before. You climb the creaking stairs, pausing once at the landing to glance back at the parlor. The crooked mirror reflects only shadows now, but you know your story lingers in its glass. When you reach your narrow bed, you find the note still tucked beneath the pillow. You unfold it once more, tracing the inked line of poetry. The words blur slightly into "He dim light," but you don't need to read them again. They remind you that memory itself is currency, and you have more of it than any ledger can hold. You lie back, exhaling slowly. The city hums outside, a lullaby of carriage wheels and distant shouts. Inside, the house settles into sleep, each creak of the floorboards like a sigh. You let the rhythm carry you, closing your eyes, and imagine all the nights ahead. They will bring fatigue, yes, and laughter, and coins, and perhaps even change. But whatever they bring, you know now that you will endure. Because survival, you realize, isn't about defeating the night. It's about walking through it, carrying your stories like lanterns until dawn. Which means you belong to this rhythm, this motley parade of sailors, clerks, soldiers, and self-proclaimed lords of nowhere. And as the piano trills a shaky flourish, you realize you're already learning how to read them, how to see not just who they are, but what they seek. The piano plays on, its keys stumbling between half-remembered melodies and improvised flourishes, but no one seems to mind. Tonight is not about perfect music, it's about atmosphere. You sit perched on the edge of a settee, corset pinching, gown rustling as the parlor comes alive around you. This is when the house feels less like a den of shadows and more like a tavern, a stage, even a carnival. Nights of music and drink, as the madam said, keep men lingering long enough to loosen their purses. Candles sputter in their holders, dripping wax onto saucers that haven't been properly scrubbed in months. Their light glows golden across glass tumblers and metal tankards. Gin is the drink of choice tonight, cheap, strong, and plentiful. Beer flows too, though watered down. A few wealthier patrons nurse brandy, pretending to savour its warmth while spilling half of it on their waistcoats. You notice how quickly the music and alcohol change the tone of the room. At first, when the men arrive, there's stiffness. They glance around, adjust their hats, fumble for coins, as if ashamed to be here. But 2 drinks in, their shoulders loosen, their laughs grow louder, and suddenly the brothel feels like a party. It's a transformation you'll see again and again, hesitation dissolving into indulgence, restraint into abandon. A mainstream fact: Victorian England was notorious for its drinking culture. Gin, once nicknamed Mother's Ruin, had devastated London a century earlier, and though reforms attempted to curb excess, alcohol still flooded every corner of the city. Taverns, gin palaces, and, yes, brothels kept the soul trade alive. In fact, some brothels depended as much on selling drink as they did on companionship. After all, a drunk patron is a generous one, at least in theory. The pianist, a girl named Ada, keeps her fingers dancing across the keys. She isn't a professional, but her songs carry enough melody to mask awkward silences. Between tunes, she sneaks sips from a flask tucked beneath the bench, her cheeks flushing as she resumes playing. Every so often she tosses her hair dramatically, earning cheers from the drunken soldiers. Ada knows her role, not just musician but spectacle. The singing begins slowly, one soldier mumbling a marching tune, another picking up the chorus, until half the parlour is bellowing about glory on the battlefield. Their words slur, their rhythms falter, but the noise itself energizes the room. One man bangs his tankard on the table to keep time, splashing gin across his lap. He doesn't care. He roars with laughter, shaking droplets from his trousers as though christening the furniture. Clara leans over and whispers in your ear. 3rd verse, and they'll forget the words entirely. That's when you suggest another drink. She grins knowingly, and you realize the workers are more than companions. They're conductors of this entire drunken orchestra. They guide the tempo, keep the energy alive, and gently funnel men toward the velvet curtain when the moment is ripe. Here's your quirky tidbit. Victorians had a taste for novelty drinks. Some tonics mixed alcohol with cocaine or opium tinctures, sold as remedies for everything from headaches to melancholy. Imagine downing one of those while listening to Ada's off-key piano. You'd swear the chandelier was waltzing along with you. Luckily, or unluckily, tonight's selection sticks mostly to gin. Historians still argue whether these evenings were genuinely joyful or merely staged illusions of happiness. Some accounts describe brothels as places of camaraderie, where laughter and song offered respite from the grind of industrial London. Others insist the cheer was forced, a thin mask covering exhaustion, despair, and desperation. As you sit here, the truth feels somewhere in between. Yes, The laughter is real, but it's laughter born of survival, a way to trick yourselves into believing the night isn't as heavy as it feels. You sip from a glass handed to you by a client, though you only wet your lips. Rule number 1, don't get drunk. Still, the liquid burns slightly and you wince, earning a chuckle from him. Not much of a drinker, eh? He says, nudging you playfully. You offer a smile and shrug. Better to let him think you're coy than careless. The noise grows, filling the parlor like storm clouds. Men clap in time, women laugh brightly. Someone shouts for Ada to play something faster. She obliges, hammering the keys with enough force to rattle the chandelier. A soldier jumps to his feet and attempts a jig, boots stomping so hard the floorboards complain. Everyone cheers, though you suspect the cheer is as much for the spectacle of his wobbling balance as for his dancing. You watch carefully, though, because behind the noise there's danger. A drunken laugh can sour into a drunken temper. A man's hand too heavy on your arm can shift from playful to demanding. The madam's presence is constant. She circles like a hawk, eyes sharp even as she smiles at a joke. She knows the line between entertainment and chaos is thin, and she won't let anyone cross it if she can help it. Another worker, Betsy, sidles up to the clerk you noticed earlier. His nervousness has eased under the haze of gin, and he now laughs too loudly at her teasing. She plays her role well, too, ouching his sleeve, leaning in just enough. He beams, clumsy but delighted, and you can't help but smile at his awkwardness. For a moment, it feels less like performance and more like two people stumbling into human connection. Perhaps that's the secret. Sometimes the illusion and the reality blur, until even you can't tell which is which. The soldier finishes his jig with a dramatic bow, toppling onto the sofa in a heap. Everyone claps, some ironically, others genuinely amused. Ada slams down a triumphant chord and grins, sweat beading her forehead. The parlor erupts in cheers, and for a brief moment, the energy is electric, unifying. Even you feel caught up in it, laughing at the absurdity, clapping along, forgetting for just a heartbeat where you are. Then, as quickly as it rose, the energy dips. The men slump back into chairs, breathing heavily, ordering more drinks. The laughter softens into murmurs. The cycle is predictable, Clara whispers. It rises and falls like waves, and the workers learn to ride it, never fighting the tide. Soon enough, the parlor will hum again, and new songs will rise. You shift on the settee, feeling the corset dig into your ribs, and you imagine Victorian reformers wagging their fingers at this scene. They wrote pamphlets warning of the dangers of gin, of immorality, of music leading men astray. And yet if those same reformers stood here, you wonder if they might laugh too. After all, under the smoke and the sweat, it's still just people trying desperately to find warmth in a cold city. A final joke slips into your thoughts as the clerk accidentally knocks over his glass. In this house, the furniture probably drinks more gin than half the clients. You stifle a laugh, hiding it behind your hand, but the thought lingers, and with it comes a quiet realization. The music, the drink, the laughter, they aren't just distractions for the client. No, they're lifelines for you too, a way to remind yourself that even in a world built on transaction, joy can still sneak through the cracks. The parlor quiets somewhat as the last notes of Ada's piano fade into the smoky air. Laughter still bubbles around the tables, but now it carries a different timbre, slower, heavier, the sound of men beginning to tire. You sit back, smoothing your gown over your knees, and let your gaze wander toward the curtained window. Beyond it lies a city that pretends not to see you. Out there, you are a scandal. In here, you are a commodity. That tension presses against your ribs harder than your corset. You've already sensed it. The stigma doesn't stay outside. It leaks into the room, into the glances you receive when a client thinks too long about the life you might lead. It whispers in the silence between songs, reminding everyone that this place is tolerated but never truly accepted. And you feel it most when you picture the city streets by daylight. The market women hawking goods, the gentlemen tipping hats to their wives, the children skipping through alleys. To them, you are a shadow, a whispered warning, a fallen woman. A mainstream fact, Victorian society created rigid categories of women. Respectable ladies were bound by strict codes of chastity, marriage, and domesticity. Women who stepped outside those roles, whether through poverty, rebellion, or circumstance, were often branded forever. Brothel workers became the embodiment of society's fears about morality, blamed for disease, crime, and the decline of family values. Yet the same men who funded reform campaigns by day might line up at brothel doors by night. The hypocrisy wasn't subtle. It was the foundation of the system. The stigma seeps deeper when you overhear conversations. A client laughs and calls the parlor a den of sin, but his hand doesn't stop tracing the edge of a worker's sleeve. Another murmurs that he'll never tell his colleagues he came here, though he jingles his coins loud enough for everyone says. You to hear. You understand the dance. They indulge here but wash their consciences clean the moment they step outside, as though secrecy absolves them. For you, though, secrecy is not absolution. It is survival. Clara slides into the seat beside you, balancing a glass on her knee. Smile, dear, she whispers, though her eyes are tired. If you don't, they'll think you're plotting to steal their souls. You chuckle quietly, appreciating her sarcasm. Humor becomes a weapon, a way to slice through the weight of judgment. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some parts of Europe during the 19th century, women believed carrying a potato in their pocket warded off ridicule and gossip. Imagine stuffing one into your corset before stepping into the parlor, declaring yourself immune to slander because of a root vegetable. Absurd, yes, but you almost wish it worked. You think back to the rules the madam listed earlier. Protect each other, guard your name, never get too drunk. Those rules don't just manage the house, they manage the stigma. If the world already sees you as less, you can't afford to give it ammunition. Every laugh must be calculated, every glance measured, every drink sipped but never swallowed fully. Respectability is lost, but reputation within these walls still matters. Historians still argue whether women in brothels internalized society's judgments or carved out their own sense of identity. Some argue they saw themselves as victims of circumstance, always longing for escape. Others suggest many embraced the life as a form of rebellion, taking control of their earnings and bodies in ways unavailable to respectable women. The truth likely fell between, shifting with each woman's story. But the stigma never vanished. It clung like soot to every corset ribbon, every rouge-painted cheek. You imagine walking down the street tomorrow, your gown replaced by plainer clothes. Would anyone recognize you? Perhaps not, but they'd still sense something, wouldn't they? A tilt of the chin too bold, a glance too steady. Respectable women are trained to shrink. You've learned to hold yourself differently. That alone would mark you. You can hide the brothel's walls, but not the way they reshape you. The clerk from earlier stumbles past, nearly tripping over his own boots. He pauses long enough to smile sheepishly at you, muttering an apology. For a moment, you glimpse something tender, embarrassment, humanity. But then he scurries on, and you know by morning he'll tell himself you don't exist. For him, tonight is an indulgence, a secret he'll bury beneath paperwork and ink stains. For you, it's tomorrow's bread. The imbalance gnaws at you, though you mask it with another practiced smile. You lean back, closing your eyes briefly, letting the sounds of the parlor wash over you. The stigma isn't always sharp. Sometimes it's a dull ache, a reminder that the world outside refuses to see your labor as labor. You're not considered a worker, though you work harder than most. You're not considered part of society, though society relies on you. It's a peculiar invisibility, like being a ghost who still needs to eat. Another burst of laughter pulls you back, and you open your eyes to see Ada finishing another song. The clients clap, though half-heartedly this time, their energy waning. You smile faintly, though you can't help a private thought. In a way, Ada is freer than you. When she stops playing, no one demands she continue. For you, there's no pause, no curtain to drop. Still, the night must be endured. You sip water from a chipped cup to soothe your dry throat, pretending it's gin so the clients don't suspect. Clara winks knowingly. She's switched to water too. Together. You share the silent joke. Let them drink themselves foolish while you stay sober enough to remember their names. A joke bubbles into your mind as the soldier begins another off-key chorus. If the stigma is as contagious as reformers claim, then surely half of London should already be fallen. You stifle the laugh, but it warms you from inside. Humour may not erase the weight of society's judgment, but it makes it bearable. One ridiculous thought at a time. As the candles burn lower, you realize the stigma isn't something you escape. It's something you learn to carry, like the corset around your ribs. Heavy, uncomfortable, sometimes unbearable, but part of the uniform nonetheless. And maybe, just maybe, the trick is to wear it so convincingly that even those who condemn you can't help but admire how well it fits. The candles have burned halfway down their wicks, their flames trembling like they too are weary of the night. You shift on the settee, feeling your corset bite into your ribs, and you notice the soldier by the fire coughing, his hand pressed hard against his chest. The sound rattles through the parlor, sharp and wet, drawing brief glances before fading back into the chatter. You know that cough. Everyone in this house knows it. Consumption, the wasting disease. It stalks brothels like an uninvited guest, slipping through the air with every wheeze and sneeze. Health is a constant hazard here, and no amount of rouge or candlelight can disguise it. You've heard the warnings: syphilis, gonorrhea, the dreaded pox. Reformers write pamphlets about the moral dangers, but the medical dangers are far more immediate. A mainstream fact. In the mid-19th century, syphilis was so widespread in London that some estimates claimed 1 in 5 men carried it. Hospitals overflowed with patients and treatments were grim. Mercury ointments that poisoned as much as they cured, or harsh chemical washes that left burns and scars. Yet still the diseases spread. The madam insists on rules to protect the house, linens washed as best as possible, herbal remedies on hand, a doctor called in emergencies. But you know these precautions are flimsy shields against relentless illness. The doctor she summons, when she can afford him, is brusque and distracted, scribbling notes and muttering diagnoses before rushing off to his next patient. Sometimes he prescribes powders that smell like chalk. Sometimes he simply shrugs, as if your suffering is inevitable. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Victorians believed that carrying a small bag of nutmeg around your neck could ward off venereal disease. Sailors swore by it, stuffing the spice into pouches and tying them with string, convinced the aroma alone kept tea illness at bay. You imagine the parlour filled with nutmeg-scented men, like a kitchen gone terribly wrong. Illness doesn't just hover in the abstract, it touches the women around you. Clara once confided that she'd spent weeks bedridden, her skin clammy, her joints aching. She swore by a concoction of gin mixed with powdered rhubarb root, claiming it purged the sickness from her body. Whether it worked or not, she survived, though she still carries a shadow in her cough. Ada, the pianist, dabs at her eyes between songs, explaining the redness away as candle smoke. Though you've seen her wince when she thinks no one is watching. Historians still argue whether brothels were hotbeds of disease or unfairly scapegoated by reformers. Some studies suggest the spread of venereal illnesses was more heavily influenced by unsanitary medical practices and the general lack of understanding about germs. Others claim brothels were indeed central to the epidemics, fueling outbreaks that spilled into respectable households. The truth is tangled. Like most truths about this hidden world, the stigma of illness carries weight almost as heavy as the stigma of the work itself. Reformers label women like you as the cause, branding you with blame. They rarely consider that the men who visit are carriers too, that disease flows both directions across the velvet curtain. Instead, society heaps responsibility on your shoulders, as if your body alone bore the city's sins. You remember your first visit to the doctor the madam sometimes employs. The waiting room smelled of carbolic soap and sweat. The benches hard and narrow. Men sat in one corner, women in another, each group avoiding the other's gaze. When your turn came, the doctor didn't ask your name, just jotted working girl in his ledger, as though that label explained everything. He prodded, prescribed, and dismissed you in less tea. "Hand 10 minutes. You left with a small tin of ointment and the sour taste of shame in your throat. And yet, despite all the hazards, the work continues, because hunger is as dangerous as disease and survival doesn't wait for perfect health. You dab powder on your face, rouge on your cheeks, and smile even when your body aches. The parlor must look lively. No one pays for despair. A man beside you sneezes loudly, startling you from your thoughts. He laughs it off, waving his hand. "The smoke, eh?" he says, though his nose runs freely. You smile politely, but you edge away, clutching your handkerchief. You can't help imagining the invisible fog of germs swirling through the candlelight. If only nutmeg necklaces really worked. Clara leans over and mutters, "Keep a lemon peel in your pocket." Stops the cough. You raise a brow and she shrugs. Maybe it doesn't work, but at least you smell fresh. Her humour softens the weight of the moment, and you chuckle, even as unease coils in your stomach. The hazards aren't only physical. Mental strain gnaws at you too. Nights blur together and exhaustion lodges in your bones like damp cold. The madam's advice echoes. Find something to laugh about each night or the work will devour you. So you search for jokes in the absurdities. The soldier snoring mid-song, the clerk mistaking his glass of gin for water, the sailor telling a story about mermaids with such conviction you almost believe him. Laughter becomes medicine when mercury and chalk powders fail. Another mainstream fact rises in your memory. Germ theory wasn't widely accepted in Victorian England until the latter half of the century. Before that, most doctors believed in miasma, the idea that disease spread through foul air. That's why so many homes, even brothels, burned incense or opened windows at odd hours. You can't help but think the reformers weren't entirely wrong. This parlour is thick with foul air. If miasma truly caused sickness, you'd all be doomed. Hissed. Orions still debate how much women in brothels knew about health risks. Some argue they were naive, uneducated, victims of ignorance. Others point to evidence of women sharing remedies, seeking doctors and warning each other, suggesting they were far more proactive than outsiders assumed. You see it clearly tonight. Clara's lemon peel advice, Ada's whispered cures, the madam's insistence on washing linens. Naive? Hardly. Desperate, yes, but never blind. The soldier coughs again, rattling so hard his drink sloshes onto the rug. The madam glides to his side, her voice low, her hand firm on his shoulder. She leads him toward the door, her smile practiced, her eyes unreadable. He leaves without protest, and the parlour resumes its rhythm as if nothing happened. But you know everyone noticed. They always notice. Illness lingers like a spectre in every corner. Later, as you climb the creaking stairs to fetch something from the wardrobe, you pause at the landing. From here, you can hear the parlour below and the faint wheeze of someone coughing behind a closed door. The sound mixes with the creak of floorboards, the flicker of gaslight, the faint smell of gin. You close your eyes, breathe shallowly against the corset's grip, and remind yourself, tomorrow you'll laugh about something, anything. Maybe you'll even make a joke about nutmeg necklaces, because in this house, humour might be the only real cure you've got.